morning, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, December 11th. We, as always, are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Hotham, Swallowin, Priest, Tulipmuk, Squash, and Homish, and Wayamino. We need to amend our agenda this morning because we have our CFO is very sick and can't be here today. So what I want to do, Council, is take item 3, the utility billing rates review, and item 4, the utility budget review, take those off the agenda, and we'll address those on Monday, December 17th. We'll move up item 5, community forest update appointments, after item 2. Then we'll go into close and we'll reopen our strategic planning session. Continue with that today. So that will be the plan for the rest of the day, and just allow Christine a chance to recover and be able to speak to this without coughing. So with that, motion to adopt the agenda moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so our first item is the Community Enhancement Grant Programs. We have a few delegations here today, which includes four-legged friends. So without further ado, I'll turn over to you, Linda and Lily.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Yes, as of last week, we have 5 groups coming back today. First up will be BC Whippet Racing Club, and then Cutting Barriers, Helping Hands, Downtown Business Improvement Association, and Squamish Men's Shed. And I believe everyone is here, and BC Whippet Club is ready to speak if they will.
Yeah. All right, and so how much time have we?
They will have 10 minutes to speak.
Okay. And I'm happy for people to sit at the table or at the podium, whichever is more comfortable for you.
So my name's Darian Adley.
So, but you do have to speak out of microphone, so you either have to be at the podium or at the table. So,
Okay.
thanks, Darian.
So my name's Darian Adley. I'm the secretary for the BC Whippet Racing Club. I'm also the regional representative for the WRA, which is the Whippet Racing Association, which is the North American group for Canada and the US. And I'm also the regional rep for the National Oval Track Racing Association. So I'm basically here to answer any questions that you have, but I guess I just wanted to clarify a little bit what whippet racing is. People who own whippets, first and foremost, they are pets. Some people like to do things with their dogs, just as anybody who has any breed, whether purebred or mixed breed or whatever. Some people like to do agility, fly ball, obedience, conformation. Dock diving is a new thing that's quite popular. And so with what all of these things have in common, including racing, is primarily what you are after is points. And those points go towards various levels of titles. And those points are unique to each sport, but the thing that they have all in common is that you're working towards a title. And you will usually get what's called a championship. And a championship in dock diving or show conformation or racing, that's kind of what you're after. And it's just a way of doing something fun with your dog, usually something that you enjoy and the dogs really enjoy as well. And sometimes it is very unique to what they were bred for, so in this case, racing. But in other cases, like for instance, the World Championship for dock diving is currently held by a whippet, which is not something that you would expect because a lot of them don't like water, but they're very good at jumping. So that's something that's new and gaining interest. And so these are 2 of my dogs. This is Ziva, and this is Anakin, and this is her father. He's 12 years old, and she's 3. And so he stopped running a long time ago, but she is what you would say sort of at her prime. So that's kind of it. But I'm primarily here to answer any questions you may have.
Councilor Friend?
Darian, I've been to a few of the events that are held here in Squamish and met some of the out-of-town owners.
Yes.
And you'd indicated that first and foremost, the dogs are generally pets
Yes.
first and competitors second. That was
Yes.
my observation. But coming to our event, are there super serious race families out there who treat their dogs like a commodity?
No, no. Everybody who owns these dogs usually has more than one. But what you do is you have a young dog, but then your older dogs just live with you forever. They are pets first and foremost. It is, you love them, just like anybody has anything else. People come from far and wide to participate here in Squamish. Squamish is considered by many to be the best running surface in North America. The Squamish field gets a lot of rain, so and it's well looked after, and of course the beauty of Squamish attracts a lot of people. Primarily people for at the Squamish event come from the West Coast, so from Southern California, Washington, Oregon, and BC are the main areas. But we do get people from East Coast US as well come in, particularly when we've hosted the Nationals, and we've hosted the Nationals here 4 times now.
Maybe you could just describe, because I think there's more than one event that takes place here, right? You
Yes.
mentioned about the Oval.
Yeah.
Can
it's a
you just
2-day
tell us a
event.
little bit about what the actual racing looks like and what the
So
dogs do?
what they do is on the Saturday, we have what's called straight racing, and that's 200 yards from start to finish. And on the Sunday, it's oval, and it's 350, and it's shaped like a U. And we have starting boxes, and so the boxes are a little bit like what you would see at horse racing. So they have a box that opens up, and on the track, a long string, and at the end of the string is a shredded up plastic bag. And people wonder why they run. It's strictly, that's what they're bred for. And when they see the movement of the white plastic bag, they just want to chase it. And so the white plastic bag is attached to a long string on pulleys, and it's operated by a lure operator, which is a person standing off track, and it's attached to car batteries. It's not very sophisticated, but, and he's got a little button that he either starts it or stops it. And so he keeps it in front of the dogs, and they run to the end, and they wear muzzles to protect them from, one, destroying the lure, because we don't want to have to replace the lure every time, and also to make sure that they protect from each other by inadvertently either catching a tooth in each other or something like that. But yeah. So they love it. I mean, the dogs love it, and the people enjoy it. And then usually what we do on a Saturday night is we'll have, this past year we had barbecues celebrating Penny's birthday. And we do a potluck each day, and everybody brings something to eat, and we have lunch halfway through the day. And at the end of the day, awards are given out, and the awards are dog treats, ribbons, sometimes, what's that?
Chewy toys.
Chewy toys. And usually the top dog may win something like a dog bed or a dog coat or something like that. And then the top dogs will, as I said, earn points towards titles.
Councilor Campbell?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So,
Yep.
I'm glad you brought up the prizing. Is there, if you win a title at the end of the year, is there more substantial prizing or at all?
You get a plaque. So, once a year. Yeah, so once you win your championship, you will be awarded a framed
I took mine out.
certificate. Yeah,
That's there.
yeah. And also medallions sometimes are awarded.
Yeah, follow.
So, is if you, and I don't know that much about Whippet racing,
Mhm.
but would this be an entry point into more substantial in terms of financial prizing racing in the States? Like this is sort of like a qualifying sort of
No.
level?
So what they have in the US, which is, I think you might have heard, has now been banned in Florida recently. So that's greyhound racing. So the greyhound tracks in the US do not allow whippets. It's only for greyhounds. And those tracks are affiliated with casinos. And then the casinos operate the greyhound tracks, and you bet for, yeah, it's just like anything else, it's for money. There's no betting, there's no money. You pay an entry fee to participate, and those go towards maintaining equipment, buying the ribbons and prizes. That's the only money that is paid. It's just an entry fee, and it's $12.
Another question?
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things we've been talking a bit about at council is
Mhm.
making sure that I think, if I've understood, that grants don't become a long-term source of funding, it's sort of a
Yeah.
short-term over the hump. Do you have, because I think we've given a few grants over the past few years,
Mhm.
do you have a plan to sort of move beyond our grants?
Keeping in mind, these are income. We're waiving fees.
Oh,
We
okay.
don't give money.
Okay.
We're a non-profit. I guess the short answer is no, because people come from a long way. People who participate in Whippet race, they come from all financial backgrounds. We just want to encourage participation. If it becomes an expensive thing for people to do, we don't want to sort of discourage people from participating. So we probably want to keep it at the $10 or $12 per dog to participate in the event. So,
One more?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
One more.
Okay. Do you get sponsorship from the local pet food stores or anything like that?
no, we don't. No. I think in years gone by, we used to get a bag of dog food donated for the top dog, but that was back in the early 2000s. We haven't seeked any sponsorship beyond that.
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just trying to pull up your application, but I haven't been able to find it. How many dogs usually participate in the races over the course of the 2 days?
Usually the minimum is about 20. And if we're hosting a nationals, one year we had about 110 here. That was the most that we've had. When you host a nationals, people make more of an effort to come. And this past year it was in South Carolina, the year before that it was in Indiana, and then in Washington State, and then we actually hosted the year before that. Squamish does quite well. Last year we had 50 dogs participate. I think 50 on the Saturday and about 40 on the Sunday.
Yeah. So just curious in terms of, I appreciate that this society is a nonprofit and
Mhm.
the effort to try and keep the fees low, but at the same time, you have folks that are flying dogs across the country, and so there's a cost to get here. So I'm just curious why you haven't considered raising the entry fee at all, if there's already a substantial investment that is happening on behalf of the owners and the racers.
Yeah.
But $12 seems relatively.
Well, yeah. There are very few people that fly their dogs.
Okay.
That's most people who attend, people from California, they drive.
Okay.
Every 5 years or so when we host a nationals, you might get a few people that fly, but it would only be a handful. Most people drive.
Thank you for the
Councilor Reyes.
Well, that was my question, was not the flying, but the number of dogs. So it's been answered. Thank you.
Any other questions, council?
That's it. So if in follow-up, if anybody would like to see videos, we have videos that I can provide on YouTube of what the actual racing in Squamish looks like. We film it every year and it's usually posted on YouTube. So even if you kind of Google Squamish Whippet Racing, it'll probably come up and you can actually see what it looks like. But if there's anything else, please let me know, and I'm happy to provide either photos or videos or further information.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for bringing the dogs.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
So next we have Naomi Dunaway from Cutting Barriers, and here to answer, I believe last week the main issues council was requesting was Cutting Barriers' long-term plan and their funding options as well, so she's here to answer those questions.
Thanks. Whichever you're most comfortable with, Naomi, you can sit at the table with us or sit at the table with you. Yeah.
I'd be more comfortable
Yeah.
with that. Okay.
So you're the executive director?
Yes. So just a synopsis of what we're doing. So Cutting Barriers was founded by Renee, who won the Social Venture Challenge in Whistler, that the Whistler Sustainability Center puts on every year. And so we have come together with Helping Hands right from the beginning, actually, in wanting to be part of the Under One Roof Collective. However, we are a nonprofit entity on our own, and our focus is on education and employment for marginalized people in the area. And so one of our biggest core values is empowerment, and we want to provide a nurturing environment where people can gain the skills and the tools they need to build a better life for themselves. And so that just fits perfectly with the vision of Under One Roof, and so we're part of that. We've been spending a lot of time doing research and looking into funding sources and developing this partnership with Helping Hands. We have funding from Smaller Savings, as you know. We've applied to funding from the BC Rural Dividend, and we're going to be developing a plan for essentially a funding portfolio. We'll need to be applying for funding from a variety of different sources. There's different grants out there that fund these types of things, and we'll also be doing our own fundraising and crowdfunding and those kinds of things. So that sort of jumped ahead and answered a bit of that question. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Councilor Rice.
Thank you. Last year, according to our notes, we granted $5,000, and this year the request is for $12,000. Could you explain what the difference is? I know it's $7,000. I did the math.
Yeah, well, we're
Not that bad, so, but just obviously something's expanded, something's different.
Yeah, well, we're growing, and we're getting ready for operations opening with the building, and we want to be prepared for that, well prepared. And we are also engaging in activities this year that develop the program, and essentially we want to be well prepared. So as a small organization, we're developing the program. We are wanting to engage in some form of activities with folks now before opening. I think we can do that, so we'll need some resources for that as well. And also, to have everything in place, like we want to have like a sort of pathway for folks to move forward and have all the documentation and kind of the tools around that. There's money that goes into developing those materials, and you can call it curriculum or you can call it program development. So that's what we're looking for this year, is to set everything up so that once people are engaged with us and we're helping them find their way through skills and employment training, that we have all those tools ready.
Expanding the program, in other words. Is that a fair sort of summary of it?
Well, yeah, developing the program, I think, is the best verb for that. We're not expanding yet because we haven't exactly started.
Thank you.
Any questions, Council? Councilor French?
So what was the $5,000 last year used for?
It was used for basically like a lot of the program development or the partnership development and the, sorry, just the research that we had done this past year.
Okay.
Continue.
And then if you were to look forward to 2020, have you put any thought into whether you'd be coming back to us again next year for another ask and what the amount might be?
After next year, I can't say I have specifics on what our ask would be because we'll have to do a further assessment of our budget and where things are going. But we'll be looking to access all the resources available to fund the programming. So if this is one of those resources, I would imagine that we would ask for that support. We know that the district is very supportive of the larger project of Under One Roof and developing employment opportunities for everyone at every level in this community is an important value here. And so this, for sure, I think would be one of the places we would come to, but we also want to have sustainable sources of funding. We're also going to be involved in the food hub aspect of Under One Roof, and so there may be opportunities as well to have revenue coming in from repurposed food products that we're able to sell in the community. That's just one example. So we do want to have some, like I said, a variety of revenue sources, not just one or two. That's not sustainable.
Mary, do you have access to facilities while Under One Roof is being built? Like, can you start the training program before Under One Roof?
I think we can on a small scale. I think right now, on the ground, it's me and working together with folks at Helping Hands. I think that we can do that without the facility, and I'm looking at ways to do that right now. Yeah, I don't want to, yeah, I guess that's the summary of the answer there.
Yeah, just the sooner we can start helping people, the better.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and it's true, I need to move away from waiting until that opens. I don't think we need to do that. I think there's a lot we can do now, and I think as we're developing the program and the curriculum, we do it along with working with people. I've already been connecting with a few employers and identifying those that are willing to take on one or two people, and then work through that process and talk to both sides and ask how things are going. That kind of thing, I think, can happen right now.
great. Councilor Anderson?
About 3 years ago, I was involved with a program at Training Innovations with a slightly different clientele in that they were long-term unemployed,
Yeah.
maybe perhaps a slightly different clientele. I was recruited through an effort of Training Innovations to reach out to the community and look for volunteers or organizations or businesses that were interested to tie in. My question is, do you have or will you consider or plan for an event or a strategy to reach out to the business community, the nonprofits community, and to community projects? We have a couple of other projects sort of like that in our list this year to consider that resemble what maybe you might be able to do as well.
Reaching out to the community in events? As
Yes,
in, like,
well, I'm thinking about volunteers for your program or a project or program where your clients may be able to fit in on a temporary basis to join a community project.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we're not looking at only, full-time paid employment as the check mark for having achieved success. I think a wide range of gaining experience, including volunteering, part-time work, those kind of things are important to connect people to. Having events to bring that together is a definite possibility.
That is, by exposing your program to the community, you can find other means of support
Yeah.
of different kinds.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That could definitely be in the plans. Yeah.
Councilor?
Can you just speak to the demographics of who this is meant to serve most?
Yeah, absolutely. So the original sort of core demographic that we plan to serve is the folks that are struggling with homelessness, and a lot of them are connecting with Helping Hands, although not everyone. We want to make our training available to anyone in the community that needs it, because we realize that is, could be a small number, and we want to open this up to everyone in the community. That is everyone in the community that feels that, entry-level training is what they need to get success in the world. And by training, what I mean too is, we may have, we will have sort of wraparound, like life skills support, if you will. So learning about professionalism in the workplace, or learning about communication, or learning about all of the different areas around financial literacy, for example, around working and living, that aren't just, here's how to do ABC skill that leads to X job. So those kinds of supports will be available to folks who are marginalized, low income, struggling with addictions, struggling with mental health, disabilities, folks that need that extra support.
And I apologize, I can't remember at the moment, but did your application identify the needs you have aside from funding?
Sorry,
So the program needs aside from funding, like infrastructure, volunteers, or staffing, or that sort of thing?
You're asking if we have those needs, or if we have identified those needs in our application?
Both, I guess.
Yeah. We will have needs for all of that. I think infrastructure is less of an issue because we are partnered with Squamish Helping Hands, and we'll be able to use the space there under one roof. And there'll be a multi-purpose room that we can use, and a kitchen that we can have access to still. I think that's less of an issue than sort of the resources in terms of volunteers, funding for staff, and for any supports we want to offer to our clients. So we will need a variety of support there as well. And the support of the community and just awareness around the issues and having everyone involved, even just on a supportive level in the community, is really important. And I think we've had a lot of good feedback and support in the community. We will leverage that in whatever way people want to give, I think.
Any other questions, Councillor? Great. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
So next we have Carol Coffey from Helping Hands Society.
And Maureen.
And Maureen McCall.
Hi there.
Hi, Maureen. Hi, Carol.
You all know Carol Coffey. She is right-hand woman, my colleague and part of our leadership team at Squamish Helping Hands Society. Thank you for having us here today. Would you like me to begin, because I listened to your conversation, so would you like me to begin with a bit of a concept description for Under One Roof?
I think that'd be great, because so much of that project came under the last council, and so I think it would be helpful to share that vision with the.
Right. So Carol's going to poke in when I miss things, I think. So bottom line, I have a new way of describing helping Under One Roof, besides the fact that it is basically going to be a facility where we will provide housing, we will provide other basic services that will make housing more than housing but home. So I don't know if any of you have heard about the rat park experiments, or the rat experiments, where they took rats and divvied them up into two groups. One group had the typical rat cage conditions, and the other group had rats in what they call rat park. And they each had morphine water and plain water available to them. And what they found out is that the rats in rat park, and what happened with them was that they went to the morphine drip less often. So just on a really basic level, what it was trying to show around addictions is that, when you put people, or rats in this case, in a place where there's something to do, and that there's other rats there to hang out with, and there's a cool place to sleep, and all of that, they don't need to go to the morphine water as often as those who are in isolation in conditions that are not conducive to growth and recovery. So under one roof is like Rat Park, so to speak. Basically, it's not just about housing, although housing is a really important component of that, and we all know, or I assume we know, that Housing First is, has shown us that when we house people, they get better. But the thing is, it can't only be about housing, and it isn't only about housing. It's about providing the other elements. So in our case, food, nurturing, nutrients, that is a key second element. Then community connectedness, being in a place where people are connecting and you're starting to feel a sense of belonging and a sense of somebody else that has your back. And then finally, the fourth element, which I think sets Helping Hands apart from a lot of organizations who are trying to do this, is that you have to provide a sense of purpose. You have to provide something more than just hanging out and connecting and housing. You have to get people in a place where their self-worth is growing, and their self-worth grows when you provide a place and direction and a place for people to give back, contribute to the whole. So that's the concept behind Under One Roof. So we brought a lot of partners together, including the District of Squamish. BC Housing has the housing part. We have that all dialed. But then other partners like Cutting Barriers, like the food bank. So on the ground level, we will have a food bank. We will have a program implemented within the facility that Naomi talked about, where our participants who have barriers will be able to key in and work with Work BC as well, bring other partners such as Vancouver Coastal, so that we can get a grip on and can get people moving in the best way for them, in a way that it builds their capacity from where they are. Does that kind of give you a sense?
Yeah. Let's talk about your ask this year about the outreach program. And how
Yes,
it
so-
differs from what you're currently doing.
I'd have to say, and Carol and I talked about this yesterday, outreach is probably the most important thing we're doing now. Because, and I'll let Carol describe a little bit more, but if you look long range, if you don't want to have a homeless industry, and if you don't want to be feeding that beast, we have to change what we do. We have to change the conversation, and outreach does that. Outreach gets out to where people are and starts helping to navigate them where they need to go. And hopefully at some point along the way, we won't need emergency shelters as much. We won't need all these services. And so we will need a lot of people who are out there connecting with people and getting them to where they need to go. And I'll let Carol sort of describe a little bit about what our outreach team is doing and why we make this ask.
So I guess it was 3 years ago when we did our point in time homeless count, and we identified that there was approximately 125 people in Squamish who were homeless or at risk of homelessness, but we were uncomfortable, I guess you could say, with those results, because we knew that we were not counting a lot of the hidden homelessness in Squamish. So there are people who are living in vehicles or living in homes, living in the bush, and you can't count them all in a 24-hour point-in-time count. And we also know, or we suspect, that a lot of these people are not accessing services that are available to them in the community. So part of the outreach program is to spend time connecting and going out into the community. So beyond just the services that we provide in our facilities, is going out into the community to take the time to build relationships with people. The success of an outreach program is based on building trust with people. So a homeless outreach worker is somebody who has a unique set of skills, in fact. They need to have a lot of empathy. They need to have good listening skills, and they need to have good communication skills and an understanding of the types of issues and barriers that people are facing, whether it's mental health issues or physical health issues or addiction issues or various other barriers that they might be experiencing. Sometimes people have a distrust of the system and services that are available to them. So the outreach program is really, research has shown that outreach services are essential for improving housing and health outcomes for homeless individuals. So it's not just about getting people into housing, it's about connecting them to emotional supports, counseling, to healthcare. One of the things that we learned when we started our program, actually started the program in 2016, so we haven't been doing this for very long. And when we started it, we only had an outreach worker on 2 days a week. But we quickly learned that it was an essential role. So for example, our outreach workers will transport clients to medical appointments or transport them to the hospital. And actually they stay with them in the hospital and they advocate for them to make sure that they get adequate care, because it was shocking to find out that they don't. And so even just having somebody there makes a difference in terms of how they're treated, and also provides that support for an individual who is probably in a very stressful situation. We all know what it's like, I think, to be having a health issue or a cancer diagnosis and you don't have anyone to support you. So basically your outreach worker is there with you through it all. And so they are really playing an important role in addressing needs beyond housing for people. And our outreach workers do all kinds of things. They help individuals navigate through the government system, so applying for income assistance, that can be a real intimidating barrier for people. So when someone sits down with you and guides you through that process, even assisting clients who have no identification, you need someone to help you go through that process of getting ID so that you can access services. So these are some of the basic things that our outreach workers do. We also have a wellness program, so they coordinate classes at the shelter and also at our transition house. And those classes focus on things like life skills, managing emotions, budgeting. We do some therapeutic arts with people. What else have we done?
Like outings where, people go to the top of the gondola, right. And given, tickets by the gondola, where they can experience a moment of like, wow, this is what the other half of the world lives like, so. Yeah, we're really feeling that this is a great investment. I broke it down to about $68 a day, this investment for you. And, what it does is when we spend the money here, and it is definitely a community service because we have outreach workers going out into the bush, making sure, hopefully eventually pulling people into the new facility. But they're also helping to reduce costs in other areas. When you have an outreach worker out there helping and bringing people to where they need to go and not getting caught up in the justice system with RCMP or bylaw, that we'll see savings in other ways. So yeah, we really want to emphasize that this is a community service for sure that helps and benefits us all, our participants, but also the community as well.
Thank you. Anything else?
Well, I was just going to say, so what we're trying to do is expand the program a little bit so that our outreach workers, we can dedicate more time to actually being out in the community and visiting people in their various sites, like in their own place of comfort. But at the same time, we want our outreach workers to be safe. And so our strategy is for them to go in pairs when they're doing work out in the community, which is obviously an added cost because there's extra staff time involved in doing that, but safety is really important. And the reason for that we've come with a 2-year ask is largely because, well, I guess there's a couple reasons. For one, it's a difficult environment right now to recruit and retain staff. Right now we have 3 part-time outreach workers who are fantastic, and we want to keep them. And so we want to be able to give them a sense that they have some job security, and that and also be able to provide them with further training so that they can do their jobs well. In addition to that, as I mentioned, the job of an outreach worker is based largely on their ability to create a relationship with people that's based on trust, and that can take time. And a relationship between the outreach program and a client is usually a very long-term relationship. So we're not helping somebody over a couple months and then, we wash our hands of you. We want people to know that we're there for them. And people can get very uncomfortable if there's a lot of staff turnover, or I don't know you, and then you have to start from scratch again. So it is important to be able to have a little bit of stability for the program.
And as the program grows, we are looking to BC Housing, who is our main funder, to see if they will also consider funding an outreach position in our new facility. So that's something that's...
Thank you. Councilor Reyes.
Thank you. Well, you might have, I had 2 questions. You might have answered them both, but these are then staff, not volunteers. Your outreach...
They're staff.
They're staff.
Yes.
And the second was, I was going to ask, was other sources of funding, and for example, the province. Does the province contribute to this at all, or are there other sources of funding?
So the history here is that we've had an amazing young man who went to Quest, who donated money 3 years running from his own coffers, which has helped us get that program up and running. We also, I don't want to say siphon, but all the other programs help to bolster this particular program. Our Crave revenue as well, and we're constantly looking for other sources of funding for this because we see it growing. We see it being, probably one of the most important things that we do. So, yeah, that's on the funding side. And we have gone to BC Housing. I have recently made an ask. There is, so I don't know the answer to that ask, but that I've made a case for that, and I will continue to make a case with BC Housing.
Working on another grants application as well.
Oh, yes.
Another funder.
Yeah, right now.
Right now.
Yeah.
You won't know till, I guess,
March.
February, March?
Councilor Herbert?
It sounds like a great program. My question is, the under one roof facility. I like it's brought everyone, together, and it's all for kind of going in the same direction. And we're being asked through this process, and maybe this is our own process issue, but I wonder if coming forward with an under one roof ask is maybe even a larger number, and then you as a whole can figure, that organization as a whole can figure out how to divvy it up, because we're sort of looking through the pieces here, and I'm having a hard time sort of reconciling all the choices inside the same, or under the same roof, I guess is the way to do it. So I don't know if we have a way to consolidate that. Maybe it's more of a question for the mayor, because as we're making some adjustments through potentially fully funding or restricting the funding different ones to make our choices, could we not group them together?
Well, I think for reporting purposes, they're all their own not-for-profit associations with their own budgets. So I don't know if you have something to say about that, Maureen, but like, for instance, if we took our food bank enhancement grant, cutting barriers, and yours, and just agreed on a lump sum, and then you guys can divvy it out as you see fit.
Well, the thing is, you can't give money to a non, like it's
It's
a
not a
concept,
guarantee for-
right? It's a concept, it doesn't have its own charity status, so that's one barrier to that. The other is, in these early stages, we are doing very independent things, even though we're going to bring those independences together under one roof. But the food bank is its own charity, and it will always be working to make itself viable and sustainable. But together, we're probably going to find really amazing efficiencies. So when we come together, the food issue becomes very different. We've custom designed this facility to have lots of storage, cool and frozen storage, so that we can, instead of throwing things away that are, getting close to not being, ready to be on the shelf, that we can repurpose things. So we'll be making salsas and jams and soups and things like that. So all of our expenses will, change because of that. But mostly the community will benefit because of that as well. So once we're in there, we will find more efficiencies, I think, and ways. But even now, like the money, the shortfall we have for the building itself, the capital budget, I go out and I fundraise for the whole group. And it does get donated or designated to Helping Hands, but we, it's for everybody. In fact, it's mostly for other partners than it is for us, because we have the major funder of BC Housing. So, we see our...
Good, or do you have another question?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, any other questions, Council? Council Fenton?
So the one thing we hear sometimes is that this is the sort of thing's a provincial responsibility, and if we step in, the province will just, leave us stuck with it and sort of shirk their responsibility. But I was thinking the other way of thinking about that, maybe if we do step in, that gives the province the comfort that it's reasonable for them to step in. There's some validation there. Do you have any sense of, in terms of pushing the province to support things like this, would our support help or hinder that in general?
I would love to answer this question. The province is coming in with $12 million. So they're doing the housing, and that's their provincial mandate, for sure, 100%. And kind of what I'm saying is that it's not only about housing, it's about these other services that we're providing: food, connectivity, purpose, these other things that are going to make that housing successful, also make the participation within that facility successful for each and every person. So yes, it is the province's mandate, but I think, and also in answer to that, when the municipalities come on board as well, the province is more willing to, to participate in a big way. I don't think we really, I don't think they thought they were going to do $12 million. In fact, originally it was $4 million, and then we pushed a little bit and it was $6 million. So they are really coming in, and I think they've done an amazing job supporting Squamish. We have a few other projects that have happened and are about to happen where, again, I think province is coming in with $9 million for the seniors. So I think it's a great show when the municipality comes in and says, yeah, I get this, we get this. It isn't just about housing. In order to be successful, we need to put wraparound services within that, within the building, and that's what you're doing, and that's what we're all doing together. So yes, I guess the answer is yes, it'll help, and yes, they are meeting their responsibility.
And, in terms of the people that have had the benefit of interacting with an outreach worker, have you seen sort of hard data changes, measurable changes in outcomes yet, or are we sort of maybe a bit early in that process?
Yes, we have seen lots of changes. Sometimes it's a little change, sometimes it's larger changes. People are going to recovery, moving from, or going to detox, moving from detox into our transitional house. People are alive, and yet, I say that, but, as well, people are also dying prematurely, for sure. But it's hard to, pinpoint it, but we're seeing, I don't know how to describe it. It's like it's like a wave of change, because it isn't any one thing. It's the fact that they're there and they're constant and they're meeting people where they are. And for every person, the need and the response is a little bit different. But yeah, people's taxes are being done. The stats are in the, I believe we've included them in the application. You know, it's got the numbers of people who went to detox, the numbers of people whose medical appointments we were able to accompany them. And each time that's, you know, as Carol was saying, the trust is building, and then as that trust builds, they take another step and another step. So I'd say, yeah, it's very clear to us that the outcomes are coming in and are there. Hard to describe, and because they're different for every person.
And we are, because it's a new program, we have short-term outcomes measured, but we are right now looking at ways to measure our long-term outcomes and putting in that evaluation system.
Okay, I've got Councillor Stoner and then Councillor Anderson.
That is one part of the grant application I really appreciated, was the figures that came out of 2017 outreach program. So thanks for including those and for tracking them. It's really helpful. My question with regards, kind of following on what Councillor Pettengill said, with the province stepping in, and I understand that they're coming in a big way with regards to housing. Where does Vancouver Coastal Health sit in the broader project and or supporting projects like this?
So we're really working on that partnership and have been for a long time. Right now where it's at is they will come in and we will have a contract for a number of beds in the facility that will be dedicated to their stabilization transition programming. So that right now is 5. We hope to up that. In addition, they provide what's called SIL funding, which is supported independent living funding, and it's meant to be an amount of money that helps people stay in their housing. So if the rent is, say, 600 and they only have 300, they'll provide the other 300 to keep people in. So they'll be in the building in that way. They've made a promise for at least 10 SILs in the building. But more than that, I think, one of the things about doing this is that the partners and the collaborators have to cross boundaries and mandates and jump over these government hoops in order to come with a sort of outside the box nonprofit such as ourselves. And, so it's hard to get a government entity to really walk with us and do the same dance that we're jigging and they're waltzing over there, that kind of thing. But I think once we're there, we're really looking at how we can collaborate in terms of, we have an exam room on the ground floor, and I think that once we get there, they'll be like, oh yeah, we've got a doc that will do harm reduction, and that's been difficult. They're struggling with that, finding a doc to do that. They'll help us with the overdose protection, prevention. So up here it's a difficult relationship, but then on the ground, the ICM team, fantastic. The mesh between and the collaboration between our staff and their ICM team has been amazing. So they're working together to get the right people in the right beds and following those people through, in a consistent way. So I'm really hopeful about that growing.
And so their role is very much more within the building. They don't tend to do much of this outreach programming, or do they have any?
Their ICM is out
outreach
as well, yes, which is the first time in, I'm going to say 25 years that it's on camera. You said it now. That mental health is kind of outside the building, and that is huge and fantastic for us. And I just want to address one other point in terms of the province being partners and what they do. They also fund us annually, like close to $800,000 a year. So that, for the staffing, 24 staffing, like it's a very large amount of money that they put into the operations of the housing aspect of things.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Maureen, it looks like we have achieved this innovative facility collaboration, different organizations coming together, but now we need a new program collaboration in there. My question relates to what's going on right now. My experience sitting around the table, for example, with the Housing Options Group and discussing aspects or examples of homelessness and situations, I have had the impression that there was at least some informal collaboration or meetings between these different agencies. We've listed several: RCMP, Bylaw, BC Housing, Sea Sky Community Services, Work BC, Vancouver Coastal Health. So my question is, where are we at? I'd assume we were further along, and informal or regular liaison and coordination between these organizations towards strengthening these programs.
We are meeting all the time. We have an RCMP roundtable where which came about because of the fentanyl crisis. So a huge number of people and agencies are represented at that table. Meets maybe 3-4 times a year. We have a Squamish Integrated Housing Solutions Group, and we should have put a different name to that. We meet monthly, and that brings many partners together, all the nonprofits, the charities, that are to do with housing, as well as the district. Great collaboration there. So I'm not really sure what you mean about program collaboration. I think we are all on the same page in terms of we are a community that wants to care for our marginalized and most vulnerable folks. Everybody's keying in where they can, but it is our mandate 100% to deal with that part of the population as a key participant for us. So we all do a little bit different things and land differently on the continuum in terms of housing and independence. And so, for instance, somebody in our facility who moves through the graduated housing from very low barrier housing through to transitional to support independence might graduate into, say, Center Point or community living somewhere else. So I think there is a really nice synergy that's happening, and I think it is something that has been certainly a push and a drive for me, is to make sure we're working all together. And I've never seen better collaboration than we have.
Yet you're identifying a gap here for us today.
What gap do you mean?
For the grant ask.
For outreach?
Well, I think the gap is the connection between the client and all the services that are provided. So all the service providers can be working together and communicating, but if the client is not engaging in those services, then having a worker to help them access all of these things where before maybe they weren't comfortable or they didn't have that awareness. I think that is the gap.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Do we have a target date for when the building will be done? I know we broke ground on it.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I would say, well, I don't know. I mean, remember the last time it was January 2020, so that's probably moved to spring, summer of 2020, I'm going to say. But I could have another date next time I come before you. So.
Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next we have Anne Cadwell from the Downtown Squamish Business Improvement Association, just here to give some insight into this year's application and why the increase is there from last year being the 15 to 40.
Hi Anne, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's great to meet the new council. I'm here today to talk about, yes, it was a substantial increase from past years. How many people here were at the parade just last week? And does everyone understand why we might need some more assistance? The parade is a very good example of what's happening in Squamish with participation and community getting out there of all ages. And it was amazing to see. RCMP said we had 3,000 to 4,000 people downtown. And along with that comes a lot of other things and situations. The District of Squamish was great in working with us with Marine Search and Rescue. We found out through our debriefing we are going to have to bring on a whole another group most likely alpine flagging for crowd control specifically. So with that, that's just one scenario, comes more expense. With the growing expectations of our population here in Squamish, having the younger population now, people are getting out and they're wanting more. They're wanting to come to community events and things like that. The 3 events that we do are Canada Day, Pumpkin Patch, and the parade. But we are also the Downtown Business Association, and our mandate is for our merchants in the downtown core. We are not an event management company. And presently, our events take over 70% of our budget. So what does that leave for us and my mandate to all of our merchants? Not a lot. And we really want to start doing more for our downtown core. A fine example is what has just happened with the lights, our Christmas lights in the downtown core. Everyone has seen the strings. I thought they were going to be a little bit more white, but they still look great. We want to look at continuing to do beautification things down in the downtown core. We want to look at supporting our merchants further and advocating on their behalf. So therefore, with that comes a kind of a change in direction from where we were to where we're going. We have a brand new board, well, fairly new board, yeah, 10 people. A lot of them are of merchants. And so there again, we're re-looking at what we bring to Squamish and what we bring to our membership or our merchants in the downtown core. And with that is, we need assistance with our events and the funding because we have to start allocating some of our funds towards our mandate. And I've broken that down further. To give you an example, okay, we'll take Canada Day. You're probably going to say, so what is this additional funding going to be going towards, or what have we not spent on that we are spending on now? Entertainment is one of them. We really want to change up some entertainment. We did have a little bit of a situation this Canada Day. We didn't have any fireworks. That had to do a lot with funding, as well as the fact that when I wanted the fireworks, it was really hot in May, and then we got all of the rain, and it didn't happen, and there's a whole kerfuffle around that. But we do have a solution with working with the district. We would like to have our Canada Day mostly downtown and then move it to Brennan Park, where we have a live stage and have fireworks there. The reason being is we can syringe our greens, and we can't do that anywhere else in Squamish. We're just looking at different options that we can bring to the table in order to continue to facilitate the needs and demands of the community. With regards to, just so you know, we do reach out for in-kind sponsorships for all of our events. It ranges from Save-On to Nesters, a number of different moving companies, Ellis Moving, Sea to Sky Courier, LNG, a number of the beer breweries here in the community. We also ask for community education in all of our events, especially Canada Day. This year we had logging and forestry education as well as Eagle Watch education. This took over 1/4 of the park and was essential to the education here in Squamish. People forget that we, believe it or not, the eagles are amazing and people don't understand what's going on with our forestry. It's an excellent opportunity to educate the public as well.
Thanks, Anne.
You're welcome.
Questions, council? Councilor Bedia? And then Councilor Stone?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could clarify, because and maybe I misunderstood, but it sort of sounded like to me the board, the new board, there's a new direction that events isn't really your core mandate, core competency. And so, you know, I guess I'm wondering why the EIA wouldn't just back away from these events as opposed to asking for much more money and presumably getting much more involved in much bigger events.
Getting more involved in bigger events?
Mm-hmm.
The DIA why would we want to get more involved in bigger events?
Well, I'm assuming if an event has a much higher budget, it's going to require a lot more effort to pull it off, right? A lot more.
Well, it just means instead of me doing it, I can hire some people to assist so that I can do what I'm supposed to be doing as an executive director and taking care of my merchants and things like that. It just provides us an opportunity with additional budgeting to still, because everything does happen in the core, in the downtown core there. And we want to assure that it's done well and that it's meeting everybody's needs and that our merchants are getting some business out of that event. that what you mean? Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly.
No, I appreciate that. I guess then my follow-up or my challenge would be, why then, I mean, why would you choose to do that as opposed to just saying, well, you know, this isn't our focus and we're going to focus on what our core mandate and we will leave it to someone else to do these events.
Right, and that's definitely an option that our board is looking at. We can't just, as you know, Canada Day, any of our events are huge events that take time, and we can't just drop it in somebody's lap. We do have the record of running these events over the last 15 to 16 years. With that track record comes experience and what expectations are for our community. So definitely, yeah, that's definitely something that our board is entertaining, starting to reach out. I know there were other, before my time, I think the Lions, Eric, you might know, the Lions used to take care of the parade. They found it too much.
The chamber as well.
And the
Yes.
chamber did. So somebody really has to take that animal and make sure it's spectacular. This is what we're all about. It's our showcase. It's Squamish's showcase. So it has changed a number of hands, and it is now, has been sitting with the downtown BIA. When did the chamber have it?
Oh, up to not too long ago, 10, 15 years ago.
Okay. So sorry, I don't know the history of how the events have come about, so.
Is that good for now? Okay, Councillor Stoner and then Councillor Anderson.
In terms of being able to pass it off or bring in additional help to take on these events, the budget that you propose has about $10,000 in it for wages and benefits.
Yeah. And that's across the board, all three.
That's across the board, all three. Do you think that's sufficient to be able to pull off all three events?
I do now that I've been involved with all three events. I think it is sufficient. And we also look at, just so you know, our volunteer groups, we do pay them for their assistance. So they are also getting a benefit out of the events. And that's the only way we can get nice big groups to come in as a team to work the event, as opposed to trickle in here and there.
Thanks, and Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Reese.
So my experience last year, and it wasn't the first year participating as a nonprofit, but it was a wildly successful and opportunity for the Forestry Center Society, and other groups can certainly take advantage of it better than they do today. And that depends on a track record, building experience and acquaintance with that opportunity. My question relates to your ambitions for 2019 in terms of performers and going to kind of a different ambition level in musical performers. I wonder if you could speak to that, what's behind that?
Right. So we're looking at wanting to change it up a bit and kind of expanding our outreach from just Squamish and the Sea to Sky corridor to look more, not just locally, but into North Van, into Whistler and some of the bands that way. We still will always, of course, we love when our Squamish Dance Center comes out. They have a couple of hours. We will continue that. So what we're just trying to do is just change it up a bit and not have the continued same, kind of like Wind Festival, where they're getting in a big band to come in for a couple of hours. It really makes people want to come in, as opposed to just having our smaller bands. I guess some of them are just 2 or 3 people. So just trying to make that mix a little bit more outreach than it was in the past. Changing it up a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Reese.
Thank you. It's been some time since I've looked at this, but if you just maybe refresh my memory, BIAs have the ability to assess their membership, I believe. Am I correct in saying that?
Assess the membership in what perspective?
For whatever their costs are. When you create a business improvement area,
Right, the catchment?
right, within that area, doesn't the BIA have the ability to assess those businesses?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by assess. We'll go in and ask some,
Request money, demand money, I guess. is the
actually it's done by levy with the District of
levy.
Squamish. Right, that is correct. So our catchment gets reviewed every 5 years. We will be up for a renewal in 2020, where I'll be working with the district at that time from September 2019 to put that out to, actually, I'll be sitting here again going, should we look at the catchment? Should we make the catchment bigger? Should we include some of the malls? And with that will come more funds, where something like this, we'd be asking for less than. Or are we even looking at corporate sponsorship? Some of the BIAs, I think it's in New Westminster, TD Bank helps out with a big portion of their Canada Day. So that's definitely, we're looking at those options as well as we start getting larger. And the demands are there and our community is growing. So with that growth comes further outreach.
So the district collects the funds,
Mhm.
but is it the BIA board that states how much they want assessed?
No,
or-
we cannot do that. That is set levy with the district at a specific time, and that levy is the same levy across BC, is it not?
So let Robin.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The BIA indicated to us how much, what their target was, and so that's what gets put into the bylaw. So the information came from the BIA, and that's what got put into the bylaw.
So that's for a 5-year period then?
That's right, but there's, you'll remember that previously, over the last number of years, prior to this bylaw, they came forward and we did an amendment to up the amount of money during one of their 5-year terms. And I think this bylaw, though, we have the ability to set it down for 10 years, and because they couldn't entice, for lack of a better word, the mall areas to join definitively. We went for another 5-year on this bylaw instead of the 10. But it's entrenched in a bylaw, so it's not a moving amount of money. It's established, and the BIA can come forward and say, we want more money, and then we would do an amendment. But they would probably have to go through the counter petition again.
Right, thank you, Roma. And I was under the impression, so this is where I am learning as well, that it's a levy and it's a specific levy, because that's what I learned at my conference, the BCBIA conference. So it is a learning process for myself in regards to that.
Councilor Herbert.
I appreciate that this, all the events that the BIA is sort of, I suppose, taking upon themselves to run, which is great because someone has to do it, and I believe they are important for building the community. You mentioned just a minute ago that New Westminster also handles their Canada Day. So is this something that that the BIAs in general feel
Every
handle,
BIA
or
is
it-
different.
yeah.
And again, I'm just learning through that through my colleagues working with different BIAs. Some have chosen to hand it off if that's there for them. But often, as Eric was saying, it has gone through different hands and it ends up in the BIA hands because it does take into consideration it's within their core, within their downtown core.
In the application, the in-kind has gone from, over the last, has gone up to $6,500, which is frankly consistent with some of the other in-kind asks, because some of the fees have gone up. But then, which made sense to me, but then you mentioned expanding the program, the Canada Day celebrations to Brennan Park. And are the fees associated with that included in the $6,500 in-kind, or is that?
You know what, it was a brainchild of Andy Dawson, and Scott and I were all sitting around trying to figure out what can we do next year to not just incorporate the downtown core, but Squamish as a whole. Are we able to, I guess you could say, spread the love a little bit and go to the center of Squamish where we can set up a live band at 8 o'clock, shut down downtown at 7, go to Brennan Park, where we know our fire chief would be much happier with that, because even if there is a band, we're able to syringe all areas, sorry, no, that's a golfing term, that we're able to irrigate everything, while giving open concept, right? Like an outdoor stage, people can lie their blankets out. It's just something that we had come, it's kind of something we're
So do we need to check that figure then, Anne?
thinking about. I can talk to Andy further, yeah.
So I don't know
And I
if
think
staff knows
Devin-
whether that includes the Brennan Park field rentals and all that
Yes,
sort of stuff.
unfortunately I mentioned. I'll just check the quotes application.
Okay, thanks. Another question?
I I think Councilor Henderson touched on it with the increase with for the performance aspect of it, the concert aspect budget going up, and I was just wondering, I guess this is a similar thing, just as far as getting maybe funding through some arts council funding
Right, and we
or
do
some
work with the
other
Arts Council.
avenues to keep, so that, and if, just to keep it contained, because it's definitely a increase is over double what was.
Right, and I can guarantee you,
Which is a challenge-
our,
which is a
we do
challenge
not
for us,
make a
so.
profit off of our events in
No,
any way.
no.
We reach out to everything possible here in Squamish. And as you know, the pie is only so big. So that same organization is giving out to all of the other events that are happening in Squamish that year, as well as ours. And trust me, I've been running not-for-profits for 15 years, and I know how to get out and basically begging for assistance. The in-kind is amazing that Squamish does give us. You mentioned the Arts Council. I'll be working, not with Sydney now, the new ED. Yeah, she's lovely. And we're looking at having her organization helping with the Canada Day in some aspect. But again, that'll most likely be in kind, where we're using some of her equipment. Right now we share signage, so we do try to do as much collaboration as we can to save what we can. I guess if we're going to do this, we really want to do it right, and we want to make Squamish proud. We've been doing this on shoestring budget for a very long time, and this is not a meaty budget for Canada Day. I'll tell you that right now. With running large organized events, this is still quite small. And I can get further numbers from other BIAs and what they spend on their Canada Day, and it's well within that range.
Councilor Stoner, did I see your hand, Councilor?
Just a quick clarification, there's a budget line item for performance and speakers for the pumpkin patch and the Christmas parade. I'm just curious what those go to.
Yep, Santa Claus and all of his equipment.
Yeah.
Next year for the Christmas parade, we want to have outdoor music. We felt that the folks didn't have enough music on them. With regards to the pumpkin patch, that's our live music, as well as the setup for that live music. And then, Canada Day, that speaks for itself.
I went to the Santa Claus parade and had a lot of fun. My perception, though, was maybe some elements of our community weren't represented, and maybe that's just my misperception, but do you have any plans to ensure we are sort of including and representing everyone in these events?
Sorry for my naivety, but I don't know who wasn't represented.
Well, I think we have a big Sikh community, a big Squamish First Nation community, and again, I didn't do a study, but my
And
perception
they were all
is-
invited, and I outreached to them 3 times. And I actually went and spoke with them. There's only so much I can do. I would have loved to have had both of them had some substantial floats in the past. Maybe for them this year, it just wasn't for them. But we do outreach to all of them. And we do have a huge First Nations presence in our Canada Day as well.
This is maybe for staff, so I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but I think we have some rules and policy around festivals and funding festivals through community enhancement grants and events, and I'm just wondering if we can get some clarification on that.
Which part, sorry?
Just in
Funding
terms
festivals.
of our policy around festivals and events and our funding through community enhancement grants.
Not recall.
We will give Lily a chance to
Okay.
look at that. Any other questions for Anne? Is Tourism Squamish involved in this?
Again, they're asked. We always do put the ask out to both. In which event?
Any of them? I
Yep,
would
they had
imagine
it.
we always have tourists around.
Yeah, they had a huge booth at Canada Day and did very well. With regards to the Christmas parade, I think they wanted to put in a parade, a float, but again, they were just really busy with what's going on in their, with their trees and things like that. It's a busy time of year, and we were fortunate to have the 43 floats that we did have. It was the largest parade in Squamish in history, so it was really nice to see. Mind you, we had beautiful weather, so we had all of the pluses.
It all came together very
It
well.
all did come together. And we had people who've never been involved in the parade out, which was nice to see them coming out as well.
It was an awesome event.
Yeah, so you were a judge.
Lily, any specifics to events in our policy? I know we talked about not sponsoring events.
Non-sponsoring, and the insurance, but nothing specific that might restrict certain events.
Just, I mean, and just remembering from the Arts Council, I think the discussion that I was heard was that the Arts Council couldn't apply for a wind festival because it was a festival and the district didn't want to put money into festivals. And maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but
Maybe that was through, because the Arts Council have their own grant, and it would have been at one point they wanted to filter festivals of that nature through the Arts Council, that they might see.
maybe it's not, the discussion I had, because the Arts Council grant that they normally do is to redistribute to the arts community and various things, but the discussion I'd always heard was that we couldn't, over and above that as an arts community, or just anyone, generally apply for festival funding. And maybe I've misunderstood that.
I guess you'd have to define festival and define events, community events.
Yeah, Linda?
Without maybe giving some misinformation, and I can go back and check on this, but my recollection is that it was around the parameters of the Arts Council grant and what it was for, and it was to distribute to art as opposed to a festival. But we've never had anything in our policy other than not supporting a for-profit event that indicates we wouldn't provide a grant for that.
And I think there was something about if they had a large admission fee and not taking profits.
Any other questions for Anne? Thank you for coming today, Anne.
Right, thank you for this
Thank you for
opportunity.
all the work you did.
Yeah, it was fun.
Pulling off this amazing Santa Claus.
And I must say, you guys have been great to work with. I know when we were debriefing last week, we really there was a lot of things that happened at the Santa Claus parade that we really had to overcome. Marine Search and Rescue in the district and myself were all standing out in the middle of the road, going, okay, how are we going to handle? There's a train stuck. Oh no, there's a bus over there. Kids are, so it was kind of fun to have that collaboration, and we all worked really well together. So it really made for a nice night.
Great, great, thank you. Thank you for taking this with me.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have one more, isn't it, Lily?
We do. I just got to note that in-kind amount is just for the downtown area too. It's not inclusive of Brenner Park.
Okay, so can we, sorry, Anne, can you work with staff to figure out what the in-kind ask would be to include the Brennan Park Field if you are going to move Canada Day?
Right.
Portion of it, because that in-kind doesn't reflect that.
Right, I can
Probably needs to.
discuss with Andy because he's the one who gave us the original quote.
Okay,
And
great.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Squamish Men's Shed, and we have Robert Golick and Mike Miller here to speak for that. And I answer your questions, and particularly last week there was council's questions regarding the petty cash miscellaneous as well, so they can speak to that as well.
Welcome, thank you for coming today and talking to us about the Men's Shed. And maybe this is a great opportunity just to talk a little bit about the Men's Shed and what it does in the community, and then speak to the questions that come up.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your election, or re-election as the case may be. I recently moved to Squamish, got occupancy of our place in September. And I can't say how thrilled we are to live in this great place and this gem of the community. And, so we have a lot to look forward to, the opportunities and scope for doing things here. I see Hardwired for Adventure. It's what a slogan. It's really, really very meaningful. So thank you for that.
Thanks for that feedback. Stephen, did you catch all that?
It's a gem of the community. I know you're going to have your hands full in the next few years, but we wish you much success in your deliberations in the years ahead. My name is Robert Gullick, and this is Mike Miller. We're both members and directors of the Squamish Friends Shed. It's a young organization, less than 2 years old. We're a work in progress. We had a big strategic planning meeting last June and focused on how can we improve and strengthen our Men's Shed organization. So we focused on things like bylaws, on the structure, on code of conduct and safety procedures, membership recruitment, and so on. We are now trying to play out a number of these things, and we're having plans in place, and hopefully by the time our annual general meeting comes into play in February, all that will be implemented. And one of the things that we noticed as a result of our conversation with Oli was the financial statements. When I was completing the applications, I took a look at the statements and petty cash. I said, my goodness, they're pretty economical in their description of our expenditures, and there's got to be more to it than that. I guess at the time, they didn't have a lot of money, didn't want to hire an accountant, and they wanted to keep things simple, but maybe that's a little bit too simple. But I can assure you that we are very concerned about transparency and accountability, and the books, according to our treasurer, have balanced to within 25%. So we have all the receipts, we have all the all the required receipts. We have a process in place that we can talk to you a little bit about later. And we wanted to invite our treasurer to this meeting, but unfortunately he's supervising a major construction company in Delta and unable to come, but he said if we can't answer the question, we'd be more than happy to attend the meeting in the future. So our mission is twofold, really. What we want to do is reduce the social isolation of older men in our community, which impacts on physical and mental health. And number two, we want to get involved in build projects for nonprofit organizations in the community. Been pretty successful on the second one, not so much on the first one yet, because we're a work in progress trying to find our way of doing things properly, but nevertheless there is a lot of interest. That we have 20 members at the present, hope we can increase that at some point in the future. Our space is fairly confined, so we have to be very careful with what the optimal number is for membership, and also be concerned about safety in that particular space. Well, that's all I can say about our we've done a number of projects in the community in the past year. Mike, who was a founding member and is the secretary of our organization. I don't know if you want to identify maybe 2 or 3 of the projects that we've currently undertaken.
Yes, we've been fortunate to work with a few nonprofit organizations around the community. I'm not sure if the council has had a chance to look at some of the projects that we've been involved with, but I'll just give you just a rough list. We've built a bat condo that is now situated in the estuary, would house about 3,000 bats. That was quite a large undertaking. We've been working with Garibaldi Grow Gardens. We built some permanent garden gates for the gardens at Highway 99 and Vancram. We're currently working on building it's a rainwater rack for the Squamish Paddling Club. So it would hold 4 large rain barrels that they can hose down their kayaks. And it's a fairly substantial structure. It has to hold about 1,800 pounds. So we're in the process of designing it and purchasing the material. We've also built a take and leave library box that's situated outside the Sea of Sky Services building. That will be followed up with a bench, so people can more over up and sit and have a nice little read. We've just finished building a community bench for It's an organization, worldwide organization, hashtag Elder Wisdom, which promotes dialogue between the older and younger generations. So it's quite the undertaking. We're working on the design of, it's a cigarette butt disposal boxes, which is a very creative idea to remove cigarette butts from the street. It's one of my pet peeves.
I hope you're successful.
We actually are. We've just finalized the design. We're just working on the production estimate for this. So we've really had a chance to work on a wide variety of projects. And again, it's all nonprofit. We volunteer our time. And it's really been, I find, excuse me, quite rewarding. I'm just a little emotional right now because our president recently passed away.
Yeah, we celebrated his life event last Saturday.
Dennis Honizer was key to our.
Take your time.
To our organization. Anyway, I'm quite passionate about this group, and we do a lot of great work around the community. Excuse me.
Maybe I could say a few words about how the process works. So when a project is finally approved by the members at a meeting, a member is asked to develop a design and identify what materials, supplies, and resources are required to undertake the project, as well as the costing. And then we notify the nonprofit organization that it will cost X number of dollars on their part to undertake the project. And in return, we will do the in-kind contribution, which is, we will build it for them using our shop and skills and whatnot. And if they agree, then we proceed. The member goes to acquire, purchase all the equipment and supply that's required, gets the receipts, submits the receipt to the treasurer. The treasurer reimburses him in cash. The reason we're reimbursing him in cash is because we had an incident in 2017. I understand there were some checks that were forged. There were no losses incurred as a result of that incident. However, I think the members were a little, and especially the treasurer, was a little shy about writing checks, so we decided to reimburse expenditures on a cash basis. Just like, when you go to, when you're traveling, you pay for your own tickets, and you get reimbursed by your company for whatever expenditure in that event. So I think that's the concept that they followed, and it may be a little bit too simple. I think so one of the strategic objectives that we're going to be looking at in the next year, or even sooner than that, in fact, immediately, to correct that somehow, to improve that aspect of it. But we are, we're focusing on being accountable and as transparent as possible. And again, every cent could be accounted for. And we have all the receipts that Basin purchased it for what project. That is the whole.
Thanks, Robert. Council questions? Councilor Stone?
I appreciate the efforts to try and get the finances in order. I know for new nonprofits and relatively small nonprofits, it can be a real challenge and actually a real barrier to try and get all of the administrative pieces in place. So it's great that that has become a focus.
We had hoped to recruit an accountant.
That's always helpful. That's usually the best approach, is to get an accountant on your board of directors. My question is just a little bit more about operations. Curious where you operate out of, and then also you mentioned that you have about 20 folks as members right now, and just curious if you said it's a little bit of a balancing act based on space and availability. So is there a process for people to join? Who's able to join? How does that work?
There's an application that's available and it's on our website. We have a website, right? So people can access the website, and there's a membership form on there. And there's a $5 fee, I understand, that comes with it. And we use those fees, for supplies and whatnot. Anybody who's, I guess, open to senior men, 55 years of age and over, but we don't discriminate against anybody else, regardless of age, sex, whatever. You can still be, come to our workshop.
Everyone's welcome.
Everyone is welcome.
And where are you operating out of?
We have a workshop that has been, well, space was donated to our group through the Cedars Manor. It was a small little cubby hole, and we have expanded to about 700 square feet. It's still small. There are issues as far as dust, and that's one of the reasons why we're applying. We've managed to, through grants, acquire the equipment we need, table saws, planers, jointers, and all of the construction to build the workshop has all been done by our members. So it's really been quite an exciting group and an exciting time.
Other questions, Councilor Pagno?
Is everyone, are people only allowed to work on these sort of agreed upon projects, or if I was a member and I just want to go saw some wood for a couple hours, is that something I can do, or?
We encourage volunteers, not to say that you cannot use the workshop for your own personal projects. Everyone does, but it's really focused for producing jobs for nonprofit organizations. So if you have a large project, we'd rather not have someone come in and take over the workshop and we can't get our stuff done.
When it's not used on a community project, we do have access to work on your own personal project. And we're also exploring the possibility of having a mentorship program, so people like me who want to improve their skills on using this machine or that machine to do this or that opportunity will present itself in the future. We're planning to, as part of our structure, youth structure, we're going to have a person responsible for workshop training and safety, and that individual will be given demonstrations and hands-on experience for us.
And we recently reached out to the Squamish chief and just, fed them our story of what we are, what we're about, and we were looking for projects, and we've just been inundated with requests from
Both profit and non-profit.
Yeah. So that's why we have a system in place. The last 3 projects, we've worked on diagrams, providing material estimates to the nonprofits, getting sign-offs. So it's a bit more structured now. It's a work in progress.
You mentioned that the nonprofits would pay for materials, and I think during the election we were told that there would be an opportunity to donate leftover lumber and all that. Can you speak to what process you have, if any, to solicit donations of materials, and do you work with Squamish Rebuild at all, or can you speak to that?
Squamish Rebuild is one of our sponsors. We cannot provide materials. We're just, we're nonprofit. We have limited funds. Again, that's one of the reasons why we're applying for this application. We've turned down a couple of nonprofits because they could not afford to purchase the materials. So we do have a storage truck, a large box truck that we've converted into a storage space. We do have some lumber, but it's, sometimes when you're working on a project, you really have to have the right material to get the job done.
We've made some provision in our application to set aside some funds for nonprofits that can't afford to pay for the materials, so we would pay for them through that way.
For instance, this bench that we just finished building for the hashtag Elder Wisdom, the material we donated for this project on time as well, and expertise. So, if we can do it, we will. But at this stage, it's just not affordable.
So it sounds like there's sort of work in progress in terms of the accounting and bookkeeping. In terms of the petty cash question that was asked, do you have a sense of, like, this was mostly, there was a shortfall from the nonprofit on materials and you guys just filled the gap, or was, mostly just a case of beer after a hard day serving in the shop, or like, do you have any sense of?
No, not beer, no.
No alcohol.
A majority of the expenses went to building our workshop. We went from, it's like 150 square feet to 700 square feet. So we've had three different phases to enlarge our workshop, like taking walls out, adding walls, drywall, moving doors. So there's been just a ton of stuff that's been done, building benches. And I've been involved in some of the earlier projects, like the Bat Condo. That was really quite involved. So I'm not really familiar what happened with that. But as I said, the last few projects, we're realizing that we have to have a system in place to get the job done. So that's where we're going.
And in our safety brochure, we're very clear about no alcohol, no drugs on the premises because of the machines that we have. It would be very dangerous.
Now we do have, for instance, we're having a Christmas party, so we have some funds that are available for our Christmas party. So it's not all buying lumber. Again, it is a social hub as well. But we don't sit around the workshop drinking beer.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Mike, for coming, and thank you for your work on this organization. It fills the gap in our community, and really appreciate it.
All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
is a really critical application for us, as you know.
Thank you
so
very
much.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay.
We did get a message from Chief Financial Officer Christine Matthews, just to remind about the only element of the policy that might be speaking towards events is that we don't give cash sponsorship, if that might have been the parameters. And regarding the Wind Festival, was at the time of the application, we weren't too sure about how much it might benefit the wider community as opposed to a small selection.
Who's Keith's watching? Everyone, do your best. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left. Is it your intention that we make decisions on these now? Is that the plan?
Final decisions can be made December 18th, I believe, at the next regular.
So we'll come back to this on the 18th. We don't need to make our final decisions now.
Unless council is comfortable making a decision, everything makes it easier for staff and for council to come forward on the 18th and pass motions in terms of funding if you want to have a conversation and make a decision today.
So maybe we'll do a quick round the table and see if there's any easy ones. Any ones that might require some debate, maybe we'll put off till the 18th. But if there's a few that we want to tentatively put forward, we can do that. Chris, did you, or Councilor Pedro, did you have a question?
Yeah, just for my clarification, I sort of had understood that council kind of signs off on these, but they're not official until the budget is approved. And I'm just looking for clarification, are we actually looking to approve these now and do early sign off and sort of lock in the budget early? Is that
The process has generally been to give an initial knock and look at the total, and then come back with it.
Mayor Ellen, if I might amend my answer, I was just speaking to Ms. Arthurs, and the December 18th meeting, the decision is part of the regular, so at the regular meeting in the evening, so there's not a lot of time, in fact, very much at all, for debate around these items. So we would rather that council have that debate and make initial decisions now, and then the formal decision would be on the 18th.
And if we need to take some time on the 17th, since we've moved the utilities, can we do it then as well? Because I don't want to go past 11 o'clock.
We can make that happen.
Thank you. Okay. Councilor Race?
Can you remind me where our policy would take us for the amount available? You gave it to us right there,
yes.
process, and I don't have it in front of me now.
You mean the cap? The policy cap?
The so-called cap, yeah.
Yeah.
So-called cap. Councilor Race.
276,000.
I'm sorry?
276,797.
Thank you.
So, council, BC Whippet Racing Club in kind, $5,198. General support?
Yes.
Okay, see 4 votes there, so that is cutting barriers, $12,000 cash request. This is to help them begin to design their program and get underway.
I'll support that.
Support there. Others?
I would,
Okay, I see support from Councilor Corcoran, and you're going to say what?
I was going to support them at a slightly smaller number, just keeping in mind that we're not going to be able to give everything to everybody. So I was thinking $6,000, $7,000.
Yeah, I had 6,000 in mind for this group.
Take a number, gentlemen, 6 or 7?
I have 8, so let's go 7.
Okay, so I've got 7,000 on the table. So do I see general support for that? Anyone want to argue against that?
I'd go for the full ticket, but
Okay, so we'll take that to 7,000 for now. I'm going to go next to Helping Hands, which is an ask for 25,000 to expand the outreach program. So that people go in pairs and reach more people in a safe manner. Councilor Rice?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same philosophy and entirely supportive of the program, except that we're just not going to be able to fund everything for everybody. So I'm thinking sort of 15, something in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I could be behind 50.
And then thoughts, Councilor Rice?
Well, I think just sort of restating the questions that I had for them when they were here, all this under one roof stuff, I have a hard time choosing favorites inside there, under that one umbrella, and all these pieces are very important, and I'm having a hard time weighing them myself, and I don't know how, this outreach portion of it does seem very, very important, as does, I suppose, the food bank that we've funded for 15, which we did reduce as well, and we've got a reduction for cutting barriers. I just wonder how appropriate all those reductions are if we are weighing them correctly. So perhaps we should pull the ones that fall under that and discuss them as a piece to make sure that we're weighing them correctly. Because if you look at the food bank, we took 10,000 off their ask, and then just that we're weighing that correctly. I think it might need some discussion. I don't know, perhaps Rick could speak to the process there.
Possibly, Councilor Herford. The challenge right now is that there is no under one roof. So these organizations are all operating separately and coming to us with programs that eventually begin to collaborate or continue to collaborate in a physical location. They're already doing that collaboration in separate locations. So we haven't addressed them as a collective in the past. So I'll leave it up to Councilor Grace.
Yeah, I was thinking, when you made the comment earlier, I was thinking about that, and the parallel, I guess, would be the Arts Council, where we get one grant and it's distributed by them. But they kind of came together as a group first and then approached us with kind of a combined grant. And at the moment, these different groups haven't done that, and they're kind of under one roof, but they are quite separate in other respects. And so we might, in the future, I was thinking about, with the different social needs, if you had a category for that, we could just pick a number and then say, okay, all the applicants that were interested in those funds come to us and we'll try to divvy it up. But some process like that might pull it together, but this year I just don't think we're quite there. So in my mind, I'm looking at these as separate applications.
I'd be inclined to support Helping Hands at the full amount, and the one criteria I'm sort of using is, with all of these, is, I think the Helping Hands and the cutting barriers and that speak much more to basic survival to my mind, whereas a lot of the other grant items are more sort of nice to haves in my opinion, and so I'd rather shade from some of the other ones than these ones.
And in addressing them separately or as a whole?
Either way, I'm not fund the full amount, so it's sort of 6, 1/2 dozen the other.
Councilor Snow?
I agree that at this point in time, I think it's important to address them separately. They are eventually going to be under one roof, but they are individual organizations at this point. They collaborate on programming, but they are individual nonprofits. With regards to the Helping Hands, I really, really appreciate the project. I think it is really important. I think it is filling a gap that has been identified in the services that are needed. My one concern is and I appreciate the need for the multi-year funding, but I am feeling even this year with the existing multi-funding grants that the then available pot of money for the remainder of the grants is already quite slim. And so as we extend the number of multi-year grants, I just want to keep in mind what impact does that have on the overall dollar that we have at the end of the day next year.
We have a limit on how much the multi-year
But we
grants can
surpass
take
that.
up. We have surpassed it?
Yeah. The current amount is beyond what the policy states,
It's supposed to be one.
which is 30%.
Total multi-grants may not exceed $83,039, and we're at $122,750.
So you would say how much?
I'd say 15,000.
Both years. Okay, so I'm hearing support the whole amount for both years, Chris? Support 15,000 for both years. Councilor Herford, did I see your hand? I think we're going to address them separately based on what.
I'm still doing some math.
I'm good for both years. I think this is one where we have to hire staff and so forth, so I think to me, that's the justification for the 2 year.
Councilor Anderson?
I would like to voice the desire to have a conversation ongoing in future about the district's role in this in future. We do, some later in the year, we'll have a meeting with, for example, the RCMP. I would like to see, build a picture of our relationship with Vancouver Coastal Health and other agencies. So I would just like to voice the idea that we should be finding our way as the district in this evolving collaboration in a new program. I'd like to speak with the other partners as well before committing to larger amounts at this time.
So you don't support it at all?
No, I do support it, but not at the full amount.
Oh, which amount would you propose?
I'm happy to go with $15,000.
15 over 2 years. And I agree with Chris's thought that in my mind, I weight this application and others like it higher than the nice to haves that are on the list.
Okay. I'm just giving Councilor Herford a little bit more time to do math.
Got my head around the
Percentage reductions.
For me, I think the multi-year piece is important, because to launch a new program or launch a program requires a bit of a commitment, and then we ask people to find other sources to keep it going. So that part I'm okay with. I would go as high as 20,000. Councilor Herford?
So on the helping hands, the 25 is the ask. I agree that I can see in their program that the continuity is very important to build trust, and to have some multi-year makes sense to me. With that, I would support 20 with this multi-year. That isn't as much of a reduction as some of the other fields, but I feel that the continuity of the humans involved with that, and this is human staffing, is really important to the success of the program. So I'm going to go with 20 there, and I think over the 2 years is what I
Councilor Hayes?
would like to see.
Let me suggest then that we at least agree on the 15 over 2 years and come back to this where we see where we land on some of these other ones and consider then possibly putting another 5,000 into it.
Okay, are you okay with that, Chris? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
For the food bank, I know that they came with a multi-year grant. Did we approve both, just tentatively approve both years? Or did we just
do the one.
So 15,000. Did we think?
Was it, am I wrong thinking that it was a multi-year?
I thought it was just one year.
Squamish Men's Shed and Helping Hands.
We're the only multi, okay, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, men's shed, 11,750 for 2 years is the ask.
11,700 for year one and 5,100 for year two.
Sorry, thank you. That's Grace.
Yeah, I was going to suggest in this one, 5,000 for the first year, and just do it 1 year, and we'll see where that goes and consider it again next year.
Other thoughts and opinions?
I like that they're working with other nonprofits to get things to enable sort of other projects that wouldn't happen otherwise. Although I'll agree with Doug and support the 5 the first year and look at it again. They're a relatively new organization and see how they progress.
Okay.
So 5 1 year.
Fully support that.
I'm trying to find their budget breakdown. I'm comfortable with just doing a 1-year grant approval and asking them to come back next year based on what it is that they need, because I think that will probably shift based on the year. In terms of the reduction, I'm trying to pull up their application to see what their budget was. I'm okay with reducing the bit, but I think we should cross-reference it with what their requests were and how that fell out.
Yeah, and I have to admit my comment was a bit arbitrary.
Yeah. Sounded-
So I'm just
sounded
trying to
good.
pull it up. If I can find it,
Okay.
I'll put in another number.
I think it should be a little bit higher if we're doing
Yeah.
1 year.
Um,
It just seems,
Like what I'm thinking, I know it was broken down to like some core requirements for safety and then a few tools and then their social pieces. And I'd be interested in funding their social pieces and their safety. And maybe taking up the $3,000 out of the school.
Maybe come back to that then?
Will's got some.
No, Lily's got it.
Yeah, thank you.
You can read it.
All right, so we have membership social activities at $3,000, health and safety at $3,650, tools and equipment at $1,450, materials and supplies at $2,100, and shed expansion at $1,500.
I feel like the materials should be coming from the people asking them to do the projects, that seem to be the model they were presenting to us. So I'm happy to take that piece of it out. I think the health and safety piece.
So 6650.
Yeah, that doesn't include the request for shed expansion,
Which was,
1,500.
so if we include the shed expansion,
8,150.
8,000?
I'd just like to point out, however we adjust their funding, they're going to adjust how they spend it. So if we cut out the shed expansion on our maths here, they can spend 15,000 on shed expansion. So
If that's the higher
as much as elder wisdom hashtag over here was arbitrary. I don't
Well,
know.
that's never gonna
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that that's any less arbitrary. So we're going to spend it however they choose to spend it.
I feel like 8,000 is a more just reflection of their ask, and since we're limiting them to 1 year, I would like to try and address some of their needs in the short term, which allows them to attract more supplies, more people, because they have a bigger shed, that sort of thing.
That's
I'm supportive of that.
Okay, so 8,000 there. Okay. The last one is probably for me the more challenging one. I think we do need updated information on their in-kind requests, because if they are in fact moving to Brennenburg,
Yeah, like their application is as is, and they can always come back as it like later and request the extra if they need it.
I'd like to have that information by the 17th, if we can, to make sure that in-kind pieces. So council, what's your pleasure on the downtown BIA, this one? Council Pettigal and then Council.
Yeah, I'm just not convinced at this point that they're the right group for these events at this point in time, and I just, BIA and especially expanding out to Brown Park, on the one perspective, it sounds nice, but then it's, how's that the BIA? And, I just really heard them say, to me, what I heard was, this isn't really our core competency, and we're just doing it because, not sure anyone else can. And, so I'm a bit uncomfortable with this. I would like to, what I was curious is, can we sort of reserve some money in our contingency so, we can see if there's other groups willing to take this on and have something there if we can facilitate that, or this is kind of our one opportunity for these festivals for the next year.
Do you want to talk about our contingency and what we use it for? We don't really designate money in the contingency.
Do you want to speak to that? Yeah, sure. So the contingency fund is really just for that, a contingency. It's not a planned amount. It's for surprise or, I guess not surprise, unexpected expenditures that council feels are a key priority and can't wait until the following year. So earmarking it for something like this is not what we would do under our policy.
Other thoughts? Councilor
I think it's great that someone stepped up to do these events, and you bundled, we are being presented with something that is bundled in the three pieces. So if we support this application, we're supporting the funds being spent on all three pieces. If Squamish and the district want to fund only the Canada Day celebration, similar to the convention, they're spending how they see fit, like the pumpkin patch portion of it maybe is the lowest of the three, but then if we adjust our funding based on, maybe they don't need to spend as much on getting the musical act, which is one of the sticking points for me. I don't think it seems a bit extravagant, but I feel that Squamish should have a Canada Day celebration, and the Santa parade is great, and I haven't made it to the pumpkin patch, so I'm sure it's great as well, but how else are we going to accomplish this? I feel it's important things for the community. So the full amount, I'm having a hard time with. I want to see those festivals happening. The BIA has taken it on, and they've done a great job of getting it to this point, and maybe you can suggest that they transition over and put it up, but there's a chance no one else comes up to the plate with it, and then we're gonna spend. I think that this is a really low number if we had to actually, and we're getting good value. If even at 40, if we were to have to take it on ourselves, which as a district, which probably wouldn't happen, in my opinion. So I'm really wrestling with this, and I know we're gonna have a hard time getting to the 40, and I really expect their in-kind of 65 to be closer to 10. If we're going to have something happen in Brenner Park, is my rough math on it. Looking at the other asks that involve Brenner Park, I think. So this is could be probably a $50,000 ask. So I think that looking at last year's, they asked for 15 and we went 11.5. I really think that somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 is about on the cash side. And then, I don't know, maybe we're at the mercy of where they're trying to go as far as where our in-kind number is.
Can I see a point of clarification?
Mayor Elliott, council can put parameters around where the money gets spent, so if council decides they want to fund only Canada Day, that can be part of the distribution of the fund.
So we do have the power to do that. Okay, I've got Councilor French, Councilor Race, Councilor Pettigal, Councilor.
I just don't see this as the best way to fund these events. And the biggest is Canada Day. The smallest is Pumpkin Patch. That Pumpkin Patch event, I participated in that, and for what it is and how it functions, I think it's great bang for the downtown buck. And I'd like us to support that particular event in some way, but maybe not on the kind of scale that they're looking at. And when I take that same thinking and apply it to Canada Day, for sure, I don't think this is the way to fund our Canada Day celebrations. And how we do fund it, I don't know, I'm not really clear on that. But I do know that when I've been involved in Canada Day celebrations previously, there was a lot of private sector involvement in making it happen, in the way of paying for musical acts and all the other expenses that come from Canada Day. So I'd like to see us fund something, but for sure, not this figure of 40,000 in cash.
Do you have a number in mind? Armin suggested 25, is that what you thought too?
Yeah, I think 25 is my total ceiling, not
Okay.
anything higher, and if we went a little lower, I'd be happy with that.
Okay. Council, we're now behind schedule, so can you keep your comments concise, Councilor Ray?
Don't want my life story.
Nope.
I'm good with the in-kind and including the notion that it might increase if Brennan Park gets added into whatever. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that's maybe a $10,000 figure. I'll accept that number. I am just not at 40,000, and I, you know, when you compare it to the other things we're asked to grant money towards and some of the other ones we just discussed, this just doesn't sort of hit the same level with me. It is certainly a community event. I get the sense that they'd be happy if somebody took it on when there's just nobody else there right now stepping up. But it is also significantly for the business community of the downtown area, and so I'm looking for, if they want to expand these events, and that's the reason for the significant increase, then I think they can find other sources for that funding. So I would go to a maximum of $25,000, which would include the grant, the in-kind grants. So $15,000 cash plus in-kind. And that's a slight increase over last year, recognizing some increased costs and so forth, but I'm stuck there.
Okay. Councilor Pettengill?
So I would be comfortable with same as last year. It's probably my ceiling.
11,000?
Yeah, and I think there are other groups that if they knew there was the opportunity, they might be interested. I can see the Arts Council possibly maybe combining this Canada Day Wind Festival, those sorts of things. So, you know, I would like to sort of, you know, push the issue a little bit and force a discussion about how can we better handle this. I think we've seen our community step forward well, and I think we can do that. The other piece that is a concern for me is the inclusiveness. I think it takes a bit more than just inviting someone a couple times, and I would like to see, I think for these kinds of festivals and what they're supposed to be, we really need to have that as a priority in my opinion.
Okay, all right. Councilor Anderson, you're working with 11,500. Do you support the in-kind first?
That's the same as last year, in-kind and
Okay, and then we've got a 15,000 plus in-kind, and then 25,000 plus the in-kind. So
I'm prepared to support the latter. That is more generous than last year, only for the reason that I'd like to see continuity here. I've been involved with SAC, Wind Festival, and Chamber, been through these conversations before. I'm skeptical that there's a solution there. I think the solution is to keep the continuity and so use that as a platform to attract corporate sponsorship. I'm not supportive of the ambition level for bringing in live music or even Brennan Park. I think a step at a time. I think the corporate support must be behind those initiatives. But last Canada Day was an extraordinary success for the three groups that I was involved there, just similarly to the Christmas parade. So for purposes of keeping the continuity, I've been there with past volunteer burnout for this event. Let's build on it with corporate sponsorship, but keep a platform for that.
So I'm sorry, just to be clear, which number are you supporting?
The
11, 15, or 25?
15.
15, thank you. Councillor Hurford.
I'd like to suggest, I think Councillor French mentioned as well, as I did, the sort of how we're ranking these with Canada Day, Santa Parade, and Pumpkin Patch, and given the limitations that we're running to budget, I would suggest that we focus these funds to the first two events, and then they can work on the funding would be good, sort of, to see if they can make the third piece happen. With that, I'd entertain a smaller number, which I think doesn't sound like I'm getting much support in the 25, so I go 15 with and include the in-kind, but
Okay.
with the caveat that it's those two events.
General support for that with a nod of heads?
Which two events?
Santa Claus and Canada.
That's the first and the third, not first and second, just to be clear. So Canada Day.
Well, I was ranking them in order of weighting and cost rather than
So the parade and
dates.
Canada Day and Christmas parade.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to propose that, and we can come back to this on Monday, because I'd like to close off this conversation, is that for now we put 15,000 in there, whatever the in-kind is, with a caveat that they focus the funds on Santa Claus Parade and Canada Day. And then we will make our final decisions on Monday, the 17th, please. Once, then we can all sleep on it, and we'll see a total. Do you know where we're at, Lily, right now? With those changes?
15,650, 296,158, around at 59, 159.
So council vote 20,000, which is actually pretty good, because we've blown past our cap way further than that before, and had to cut a lot, it's very painful.
Don't give them bad ideas.
And that was the 116,000 that we're already forced to provide.
So this is not the easiest to schedule. What? Does that include our
Oh, no.
multi-year grant?
That includes.
That's everything, all in, right? Like, you're not gonna tell me.
That's everything.
Okay, okay, so everyone sleep on it, we'll come back and spend half an hour with it on Monday the 17th. Okay, and then why don't we have a 5-minute recess, everyone can stretch their legs, and then we'll come back and do the solid waste. Sorry. So we're in recess, 5 minutes. Welcome back to Committee of the Whole for December 11th. We are now on our solid waste composition update. We'll turn over to Mr. Wickham.
So my name is Chris Wickham, I'm the Director of Engineering, and we have here today Shannon White, our Sustainability Coordinator, who is in charge of the solid waste portfolio, including our zero waste program and the landfill, and Wilbert Yang from Tetra Tech. And so Shannon will be presenting, we've looked at our composition of our waste and our recycling in 3 different ways in the past months, and gives us a pretty good view on what's working and what isn't for us. Wilbert will specifically be presenting about the most scientific part of that, which is the waste audit that was done out of the landfill.
Great. Welcome back, Wilbur.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again. All right, Shannon.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council. So as Chris, sorry, as Chris mentioned, I'll be giving an overview. So in 2018, we did we had a look into what our waste and recycling and organics is composed of in 3 different ways, and I'll be going through those. And so the first way was really kind of just to put in layman's terms, like what are we considering what is being thrown out as garbage and coming to the landfill? The second one is what is in our recycling totes at the curbside collection, and then also an overview of the curbside tune-up, and I'll talk about what that was and what their findings were. And then I'll also talk about kind of the overall high-level findings seen throughout all 3 kind of different waste compositions, or audits, as some people might call it. And then kind of what are we doing towards addressing the issues that we've seen, and kind of next steps. So just a high-level look at Squamish's waste. So I know that you are familiar with our zero waste strategy, and I've come before you with the 610 kilos per person figure before. I did take a look into kind of how do we quote-unquote compare or rate to other similar sized municipalities. Unfortunately, this type of data is really collected at the regional district level. The province collects it at the regional district level, and despite reaching out to several municipalities of similar size, some people just don't collect it at the municipal level. So I do have whistlers that we can compare with. So the RMOW is 369 kilos per person in 2017, which is slightly different than ours. And again, just to remind you of the provincial target and our OCP target is that by 2020 we will be at 350 kilos per person. And just to give a bit of background on what is that number and data that I'm speaking to. So when I say 610 kilos per person, we're talking about garbage coming to the landfill from the district of Squamish. So it can be businesses, it's residents, it's multifamily homes like apartment buildings, and then we basically take all of that garbage data and then it's over our population. So it excludes things like Furry Creek and Britannia, which we also get their garbage. And so you can see here on the graph that has the green and orange, where Squamish Lillooet Regional District kind of ranks, and I've based it on population. So the top is Metro Vancouver, which is the biggest regional district in the province, and then Central Coast is at the bottom. So Squamish Lillooet as a whole is kind of in the middle there. So the waste composition study, so what it is that, as I mentioned, it's really looking at what is hitting our landfill as garbage. So I'm not speaking of like the wood or the metal or the styrofoam that's diverted at the landfill. It's really what's entering our landfill. And so we put out an RFP earlier this year to really look at, they look at different streams. So single family homes, multifamily homes, our commercial sector, and construction, and kind of what does that garbage look like. And we do have it budgeted in the 5-year financial plan for every 2 years. So the last one was in 2016, and it does come out of the solid waste utility. So with that, without further ado, I'm just going to transfer to Wilbert's presentation, and I will let you, while I figure out how to do this, and you can. Oh, it's okay, we got it. You got it? Yeah, I just need to focus on it and not talk at the same time. So sorry, Wilbert, you can take over while I. Thanks.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm just going to give you a little update in terms of the results that we received from our waste audit last summer. So this is the crew. In terms of, go to the next slide. In terms of the agenda, is talk about the objectives of the project, what we're trying to do, talk about the results by sector, look at what the diversion potential is, how much more material can be diverted, how things have changed since the last waste audit in 2016, and any conclusions that we can get out of the results. So in terms of the project objectives, it's really just to kind of see how we're progressing since 2016. And we need to recognize that this was done in the last week of July. So it's a snapshot of what's happening then in terms of what people are throwing out. So looking at the number of samples is basically done over a week. We have 7 samples from the single family households, 5 from multifamily complexes, 8 from the commercial sector, so stores and offices and so forth, and 7 samples from the construction and demolition activities in the community. So from an overall perspective, this is the results when we kind of bring all the samples together and see what the numbers look like. So what's interesting is that the largest categories are organics, hygiene, which is primarily diapers, and there's still a fair amount of paper and plastics, but really to bring your attention to the organic side, organics is a very big part of it. It's almost half of the waste disposed, but more importantly, there's a big chunk of it is food waste, but also a big chunk of it is wood waste from the demolition construction activity, which is kind of makes sense in terms of it's in the middle of summer, probably a lot of people are doing home renovations and so forth.
Can I just break in with a small comment that all of this percentages and everything is done by weight?
It's done by waste, yes.
Wet diapers are heavy, plastic containers are light, so it doesn't necessarily tell us what airspace or whatever.
Okay. So when we look at the single family, like I said, we had 7 samples. Just an indication of what's going on in the summertime. One of the samples that we analyzed was mostly C&D materials, so construction demolition materials. So basically, I guess someone was there and doing home renovations and basically threw all the materials there. So we had one sample like that. That's not very indicative of single-family residential waste, so we kind of took it out from our analysis. But what's interesting is we still did see a lot of organics material, most of that being food waste. And we also saw a lot of diapers, hygiene products. So generally speaking, all the other components are quite small in terms of the samples. On the multifamily side, definitely almost half is organics, which is food waste primarily. And a little bit, 20% of the hygiene products and everything else is relatively small. So what it shows is that in terms of the recyclable materials, most people are using their programs.
Can I
Sure.
ask some questions? So with the definition of multifamily, is that the townhomes that have curbside organics pickup as well as the multifamily condos? Or is it, like, how is that definition of multifamily?
It's mostly condos, so it's the programs where they have a dumpster and centralized disposal.
Thank you.
So commercial sector, same, what's interesting is we also saw a lot of food waste, and most of that was actually avoidable food waste, which is interesting. So in terms of restaurants and grocery stores, materials that could be diverted for reuse activities, or they can just kind of implement programs to reduce the amount of food waste they would generate. That's one of the things we found from there. And also with paper, a lot of that paper is compostable, so napkins, paper towels, so forth. So those things could be diverted as well. And then there's a fair amount of plastics as well. Okay. In terms of demolition construction material, we use a different approach because everything is much bigger and heavier. We used a visual approach for looking at how much C&D material is disposed. So we use that approach as well for a lot of other municipalities. So Metro Vancouver, Fraser Valley, and other parts of BC, we use that approach as well. What we found, and not surprising, is that most of the material being disposed is wood waste, and that's had a big factor in terms of affecting our overall results. And also there's a lot of inert building products that are also being thrown out. So that's probably represents almost 95% of the waste. In terms of potential diversion, what's interesting, well, about 24%, almost a quarter of the material, there's no home for it. It's just stuff that has to be disposed of. There's no opportunities for recovery or diversion. But 3/4 of the material potentially has a home in terms of being diverted. In terms of what can be diverted, there's a lot of compostable materials such as curbside recyclables or things you can drop off at the depot. There's also about 11% is recyclable materials. And there are other depot type materials which aren't collected in the waste stream, which is like glass and other materials, household hazardous waste. So in terms of how we compare from 2016, generally speaking, what we found was that there was a slight increase in the amount of organics in the waste stream, and it could be that it's primarily from construction and demolition activities. But we did see a definite increase in the multifamily sector as well as the commercial sector. So certainly there's a little bit more organics being disposed.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Shannon, have we implemented the rule around organics diversion yet for multifamily and institutions?
No, it's started.
Yes.
Yes.
We have implemented the rule.
Right.
Sorry,
There was a two-step process, right? There was like you guys, this is coming. And then at one point, we're gonna lay it down. So where are we at?
The direction from council was that the ban would be immediate, and that, and so that's what the bylaw has said for a little over a year now. There's a requirement for multifamily and ICI to sort of separate their recyclables and their organics. And then we would take a phased approach to enforcement of that ban, starting off with education materials and working with businesses and stratas, and then moving on individual strata or business by business basis with you've had enough time now, you haven't complied.
So when we get to
haven't
next
been-
steps, can you talk about that, Jen? Thank you.
So in conclusion with the results, certainly there's a lot of organics in the waste stream, and most of that is wood waste and food waste, avoidable food waste. So that represents the greatest opportunity in terms of more waste diversion in the community. What's good to note is that the infrastructure is in place to reduce this material. So a lot of it is just to implement programs to help people understand that these programs exist and get them to change their behavior. Makes sense?
Thanks, Ron.
Great. So just to continue on, one thing I just want to clarify in Wilbert's presentation is that the word organic doesn't always necessarily mean compostable. So sometimes you'll hear them used slightly different, and in the audit you might see compostable paper or something like that. So in the solid waste industry, they're not always exactly the same. So just as a clarification. So I just want to speak about Recycling BC. So Recycle BC, we joined early in 2018. Sorry, I was going to say 2019. We are members of Recycle BC, and so they essentially own all of our recycling material that is collected through our curbside collection. So as soon as those people's residents' totes hit the curbside, that is their material, and we help facilitate it get to one of their depots, and then it gets recycled through them. So to ensure that the District of Squamish is sending material that they can recycle and that is appropriate to their system, they conduct internal audits on our materials that we're sending them. And the audits are random, so to date we've had 4 different ones. So what they do is it's completely monitored by Recycle BC, it's filmed from start to end, loads are dumped on site, which is the local site is GFL's Queensway Recycle Depot. And that's the bottom picture there is actually one load of recycling that I also attended and watched the audit. And so I just want to give a high-level overview of what their findings have been to date. So our current average contamination rate is 16%. So that's 16% of the materials that we're sending Recycle BC should not be sent to Recycle BC. They are excluded from their program. One of our audits was found to be over 20%. And this is concerning because the average for a similar system of what we have, so where we have everything goes into one tote, so it's called single stream collection, the average in the province is 9.3 for what our style. So we're currently at 16%, which is also one of the highest averages in BC for single stream. And that being said, we had a little bit of deeper dive, and these audits do provide a snapshot into kind of what our large contamination issues are, and they found that glass, we have a significant amount of glass in our recycling, and then something called unsortables. So what it is when somebody bags their recycling, and what happens is when recycling is bagged, it's considered garbage due to several, like WorkSafe BC and things like that. Nobody's opening those bags of recycling. So that's a huge level of contamination. Also, people are putting just garbage into the recycling bins, and then kind of soft plastics. And so not only is it we have a contract with Recycle BC, and so by not meeting the threshold is 3% level of contamination. We do face financial penalties. So currently we are receiving around $240,000 from Recycle BC a year, which is going towards the solid waste utility. But through our contract with them, they do have the ability to fine us up to $5,000 a load, up to $120,000 a year. So they can't fine us beyond $120,000. So I am in conversations with them, and I hesitate to say they're not going to slap fines on us right away, but they want to see us moving and what progress, and that we're actually, as a municipality, we're working towards addressing a contamination. And so that's part of the zero waste strategy and the bylaw and a lot of work that's been happening. And part of that is the curbside tune-up. And so the curbside tune-up was in partnership with Squamish CAN, which is Squamish Climate Action Network, Green for Life, and then Recycle BC. So it was funded by the District of Squamish and Recycle BC. And what it was where Squamish CAN had folks on the ground, and they visited as many totes as they could on Recycling and Organics Day in the summer. And they did 2 weeks in the summer and then 2 weeks in the fall, so 4 weeks in total. So in the second round, they tried to visit the first, so the kind of the same folks got visited twice was the effort. So that kind of just to see if we could make a difference in one kind of neighborhood in particular, or neighborhoods. So in total, they visited 2,603 totes, which is great considering they're on foot. And every single tote they left a notice that said, "Great, you're a recycling champion. We don't see any contamination." And we handed out Recycle Champion stickers, which is in the top corner there, and it's kind of a little bit of like pride in your recycling tote and acknowledgement that this person really knows what they're doing, or this household. And then they also left on the note saying, "We saw this contamination," or "This is an issue," or "Get your totes fixed," or "Your clips fixed," if it was an organic. So there was it was a really great way to provide individual feedback that we can't reach through our other District of Squamish communication channels. And what we found was, the curbside tune-up found that 83% of the recycling totes had contamination, which is in line with our high contamination level that I just presented through Recycle BC. And the auditors, or the curbside tune-up team, found very similar things to the Recycle BC audits, which is unsortables, those bagged recycling, soft plastics, multi-laminate plastics, which is kind of anything that's, if you think of plastic that crinkles, like kind of harder plastic, that's kind of an easy way to think of it. Garbage and organic material in recycling bins in particular. They did see a slight improvement on the second round of a reduced amount of totes with contamination. And one thing that I didn't mention on this slide or in the report, but I would like to address, is that we actually were one of the first municipalities to use our collector app, which is linked to our GIS, District of Squamish GIS system. And so we were able to collect all the data related to the curbside tune-up electronically. So no, there's no paper used on that, which is fantastic. And kind of in that stream of how the impact was of the curbside tune-up, we did see a very high level of engagement for this. So District of Squamish social media posts were shared a considerable amount of times, like 11, 15 different times. Lots of online and through social media engagement. I also got a lot of phone calls and emails, and then the curbside auditors were also approached by people on the street. And even if someone approaches in kind of maybe questioning manner, it's an opportunity to engage someone, and kind of, it's an education opportunity always. So it was very successful. And we are looking hopefully to be able to offer this on a regular basis. It will depend on budget discussions, but also if Recycle BC provides some funding for it. With that, I just want to kind of, we took a look at all these 3 audits or waste composition studies that we did this year, and kind of looked at what are the key key high-level issues that need to be addressed. And one is just a general knowledge gap. So often people, when they reached out through, for example, the curbside tune-up and said to me, hey, but I did everything right, and a further conversation would lead to what they didn't do right. So people think that they're doing the right thing, but we just need to help them along that path. And so just there's this knowledge gap. And then one thing that came up through the waste composition study that Tetra Tech did in particular was the need for multifamily home and commercial properties, as well as construction demolition sites, to really start sort of separating and implementing and following the solid waste bylaw. And then finally is that the significant amount of organic material that we're seeing end up in the landfill, the decomposition process produces a lot of greenhouse gases, and we have a significant opportunity to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions created through our landfill by removing that waste from there. So to speak to the question of next steps, so really the first and key thing is solid waste bylaw implementation, and I'll dive into that in one moment, but then also supporting that is the waste room guidelines to help create waste rooms at multifamily homes and commercial properties that are the right size so people can and have the ability to set up the bins that are needed, as well as creating guidance and supporting the construction and demolition industry and helping them kind of get on board with source separating and doing it on site, and then also looking at events and film. I'm not sure which level of detail solid waste bylaw implementation you'd like to dive into, so maybe do you want to provide any clarification on that? Or
I'd like to know when we're starting enforcement.
Great. Yes.
I can speak to that. I think the data is pretty clear that we haven't moved the needle. And that's disappointing, not super surprising. We had a number of factors conspire in the past year that we weren't able to put as much staff time as we had originally planned to the implementation, including the Recycle BC rollout, which is a good news story. GFL came in and changed a lot of personnel. There's a lot of managing of that contract, which ended up being a good news story as well. We've done some good things with the folks up there at the landfill. Unfortunately, we really only completed the first couple phases of the implementation plan, and that is we did meet with and run workshops for stratas and for businesses, and created a lot of materials and training materials and everything. What we haven't been able to do is really start that one-on-one, going out and talking to the stratas, working with the businesses, best practices for breweries, and going to all the breweries, and that really high-touch activity, if you will. We do have a budget request for a part-time temporary position to allow that really high touch in the community, and as well as working with Squamish Can and other folks in town to really get to that point. Shannon has also developed basically a workflow where we can, for each individual business, work them through, and at one point there's a branch point of and we've visited and you're doing it or you're not doing it, and if you're not doing it at that point you get a fine. So we're working with bylaw on that, and the fines would this temporary part-time position would actually be able to write tickets as well as part of that position.
Just to kind of add to what Chris spoke of, is that essentially all through that engagement, or the intention is through this kind of education first, front-end enforcement, is that we would be building the evidence file, if you want to call it that, to when suddenly the ticket needs to be written. So it's like we've contacted you, and through kind of the outreach piece, then it's when somebody's not in compliance, they would receive a fine. And just to add on that though, we have not updated the MTI bylaw, or not the MTI, the fees and charges bylaw to have a fine in place. We don't, we just want to
We
have it
need
done.
to do that.
MTI, thank you. We do, but we're still in discussion with the bylaw, and we want to make sure we have the right level of fine before we fix anything.
My question was proposed levels of fines, so if we're still in discussion, we have a range that's being discussed, and we can sort of just start to wrap our heads around it before it comes, as far as like the fining, like how are others handling this fining situation? Maybe is another way to phrase that, and we're probably working with similar numbers.
I can, like, it's, other municipalities?
Yeah, or I guess the question is either could be taken either way. What numbers are we batting around, or what has been considered best practices with other jurisdictions that must be facing the same challenge?
I hesitate to put any numbers about what we've been discussing out here because it's really still in discussion. But I know, for example, the city of Calgary, they have been working on the implementation of their similar bylaw for the past 3 years. And their fine for this is $250 once a business gets to the end, or a strata gets to the end of this kind of evidence-based, like enforcement, education, etc. outreach. It's $250. However, due to the way their fines are set up, or their fees and charges bylaw, or sorry, MTI bylaw, apologies, the fine itself is actually around $1,500 because they have other charges that we don't quite have. So that's what we're working on, is kind of like, how can we create something? So
To follow up on that, like, it costs them money to source separate and have load picked up to go to organics, and versus just shoving it all in one bin and having it go to the landfill. So that $1,500 doesn't sound punitive enough to make it worth my while to source separate.
So our financial approach is twofold. One is that if it's mixed waste, you have a higher fee at the landfill.
Yeah.
That works in some cases, but not in others, because you have the problem of the commercial hauler blending together a bunch of different bins of it. But also in the bylaw would be written as per day. I mean, that gives us, it's not $500 a year.
Okay.
So we can go back. And there's a lot of judgment involved on staff level on how often you hit the same business, essentially. But I think $500 is our limit on the MTI.
Yeah.
And so we'll have the maximum we can do. And that's, I think, what our approach is likely to be. When we come to council, it's to ask for $500 per day.
Can you just spell on MTI?
Municipal ticketing information bylaw.
Do you want to finish?
yeah, if I can just address something that Chris mentioned. So he spoke to the budget request that you will be seeing when you review the solid waste utility budget, but also the mixed waste percentage threshold. I just want to speak to that very briefly to ensure that everyone is aware of what it is. So when we talk about mixed waste percentage, or mixed waste at the landfill, is when a load of garbage comes to the landfill and we find that it has over X percent of recyclable or organic material in it, instead of being charged the garbage rate, it gets bumped up to the mixed waste rate. And the mixed waste rate is double what our garbage rate is. Largely, this is applied to it's applied to businesses, I should just say, on the end. So yeah, and why I say X percent is because currently in our bylaw, we're at 20%, but we have it outlined in our bylaw to be reduced by 5 years annually until we reach 5%.
5%.
What did I, sorry.
5 years.
Yes, sorry. It'll be reduced annually by 5% until we reach 5%. And so we will be coming to council next week during the regular to discuss this year's reduction of that.
Good question. Councillor Stoner.
I'm going to go back to something that you mentioned during the presentation about differentiating some of the waste that is identified as organics. Tetra Tech audit is not necessarily compostable, but they still have a diversion stream. So what is an example of that, and what would that alternative diversion stream be for organics if it's not compost?
There's some wood materials that can be diverted. So there are clean wood waste, which can be used for other materials, either for composting or using as a fuel. There's also painted wood and other things like that. So.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor French.
Thank you. So our information needs and the diversion opportunities are going to evolve over time. I'm wondering if I can ask, you've got the biannual audits are budgeted. We're going to continue with that program you proposed. Have you learned anything from the last audit to this one? For example, the scheduling of the audits, because we noted that you were busy making explanations, one late summer, early summer, and theorizing about certain things that you observed. Did we schedule it at the same periods of time last time, for example? My general question is, how can we improve, or can we improve on how we do this auditing? That seems to be very important.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good question. I think whenever we do waste audits for other communities, we tend to do a multi-year or multi-event. So that way it gives a better overview of what's happening over the course of the year. I mean, what we see is that as springtime comes along, you see a lot more yard waste materials going to the curb. If there's an organics program, it'll go into the yard waste collection program. But you definitely see more materials being discarded. And then at the same time in the summertime, you tend to see less organics, but you then tend to see more construction materials because people are doing home renovations and so forth. And the same thing in the fall, you tend to have this big boom of yard waste again that people are throwing out. And in the wintertime, you just have a lot less yard waste material. So it kind of fluctuates over the course of the year, and it's really trying to figure out what is a good time of the year that gives you a good representation of what you want to see. So,
visual audits of the C&D sector were conducted. That's standard practice. There aren't really any other practical options for that.
You could do the weighing approach, just much more expensive. But by doing it visually, they still get very good estimations of the quantities.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
I'm wondering, out of your research, if you found that there is a scenario of chronic large-scale offenders who regularly are doing a really bad job of source sorting, and I'm thinking specifically of residential collection. So I think I heard that there's a lot of really well-intentioned people out there who for the most part are getting it exactly the way we want things sorted, but are regularly not quite hitting the mark. Does your data show that there are chronic large-scale offenders in the residential collection?
For me?
Whoever, I don't know.
From my perspective, there's always going to be people who just don't care and won't do anymore. And that's usually, basically 10 to 15% of the population. There's always going to be that percentage that just don't care. But generally speaking, 85 to 90% of the population, once you tell them what to do and once they know what the fines are and what the implications are, they will comply.
Okay, so then now that leads to my second thought. I saw the GFL residential collection schedule in the paper, full page ad, and we're going to continue organics once every 2 weeks. No, that's not the case.
Just as a clarification, so we weren't consulted before that schedule came out. I have reached out to them since, so there will be a change in this week's chief ad that GFL has put out. Because weekly organics is something that is part of the solid waste utility budget, we can't say when it begins and ends until we've had that discussion. And because those discussions are happening next week, unfortunately, I mean, we were unable to give GFL the start and end date. So the intention, we do have blocked off 14 weeks right now tentatively in our budget for weekly organics. So I'm just...
Which is the same as last year.
Which is the same as last year, thank you. But unfortunately, when they produced that calendar, they did it without
That's
chatting.
really confusing for
I've already
our
fielded
residents.
a few.
That's really unfortunate.
Any more questions, John?
Well, I'm just glad to hear that it's every 2 weeks, because I was really disappointed. And I think that having organics weekly is probably a big part of the solution around education and making it easier for people to separate organics from.
One thing with the solid waste bylaw implementation is really a focus on the multifamily, because to your point, Councillor French, is that folks who have curbside collection currently do have the opportunity to participate in our organics collection. Whether they do or not is a different question. But there are a lot of multifamily, and when I speak multifamily, I'm speaking of like apartment complexes in our community that do not have, they don't even have an organics tote. So right now we are requesting them to bring it to GFL's depot on Queensway or the landfill to drop it off for free. But this is a big focus, this chart up here, that 48% of organics material in multifamily home, with 89% of that being food waste. It's a huge opportunity for the district of Squamish.
Thank you. Councillor Pettengill, Councillor Anderson again, and Councillor.
So I have a few questions. One, do we have a sense of why Whistler is doing comparatively better than us?
I can hazard a guess. I actually received that information a couple of days ago and set up a call to talk to them about why. However, it is important to think about how Whistler's waste streams are set up completely different than ours, in the sense that everybody in the resort municipality of Whistler have to bring their garbage to 2 sites or 3 sites in the community. So they don't have curbside collection like we do. And so it's a little bit, it's managed differently, which can see an impact on waste disposal. So
I
that's
think you're so
where I
cavalier
leave
on your
it.
waste when you have to transport it yourself.
Right. Yeah, but I'm not sure if you've seen similar scenarios.
Yeah, no, I think Whistler is unique because the community is very conscious about the environment. And I think they have the opportunity to have curbside collection, but because of potential issues with bears, they chose not to have curbside collection. And by doing that, they're taking the extra step to make sure that whenever they bring the waste to the depots, they separate out the garbage, separate out the recyclables, and they'll, of course, they have an area for organics. And there's people at the depots to really help them out. So when they come in, those people are there to pick those materials up and put it in the proper places as well too. So there's a lot of, you actually have people who are working in the industry helping the residents. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if I can. So you mentioned the weight metric and then visual inspection. As I understand, our primary challenge at landfill is the volume one. So are those, do you think weight and visual inspection are sufficient metrics, or can you speak to why we wouldn't measure the volume of?
I think in terms of weight, weight is used because it's easier to at least differentiate. And in all landfills basically have a scale where the material goes in, so at least they can measure how much is going in based on that, just from the weight. In terms of volume, certainly there are some materials that are less dense, but most landfills will actually have a compactor where they drive over the waste to try and compact it down as much as possible. And a good landfill operation will basically take the extra step to do that compaction, but at the same time it costs more to do that because of the extra fuel and so forth to kind of drive the machine down. So it's one of those things where where the community or the operator needs to figure out what's the right level for them.
I sort of not clear if, it sort of sounds like diapers are a big issue here, and I would just like some clarification, are they a big issue or not? And can you speak to cost benefit of cloth reusable and the impacts on our sewer versus plastic disposable going into the landfill?
It's certainly, I mean, in terms of, I mean, Squamish is a young community, lots of people having kids and they have diapers and stuff, but there's certainly a lot of benefits with having cloth diapers. You know, there's the not going into the waste stream. There's also organics being processed at wastewater treatment plants rather than at landfill, so there's less GHG potentially. At the same time, I think, and this is up for debate, but sometimes they say that the kids will get toilet trained faster having cloth diapers than with the disposal.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Anderson.
So the proposed new part-time position might address education strategies in the construction and renovation sector. I note that in my neighborhood, the curbside program introduced sort of some social pressures, people looking out the window about the results of the neighbor. But that also needs to be introduced to the construction sites and renovation sites. But my question relates to, we recently revised our building bylaw, and perhaps that might deserve some attention in that when we did that revision, mainly the focus was around energy, and not on demolition and materials handling. But perhaps there's some potential to address our building bylaw in that area. I was down a couple of weeks ago at a presentation on green demolition in Lower Mainland, and it's an extraordinarily low level, a couple of percentage points is their estimation. They really want to build that up. So is there potential that this part-time position might address potential bylaw revision? Or the program?
I think that's a great question. It's not something that I've looked into.
So the intention when we spoke about construction, demolition, waste diversion, the intention is to develop guidance and support documents and kind of a training, like help that, like kind of train the trainer situation, but also to then work with our building department and find those areas in the District of Squamish processes where we can influence the demolition in particular. Construction is one side, but kind of how can we do deconstruction and encourage that in a way that our community can still work with it. I'm not saying you need to 90% deconstruct your building right away. How can we move towards what Metro Vancouver and some of the participating municipalities are doing? So that is the intention, and whether it's the part-time position or one position, I think is kind of we need to work around.
Any other questions? Because I'm going to try and wrap this up with the last remaining speakers. So Eric, if you've got more, ask them now.
My interest in the audit practices relates to the organics as a feedstock, and that picture is evolving. It can be blended with other feedstocks to potentially offer some conversion solutions. I just wanted to pass that on. That the C&D feedstock is very valuable and for blending purposes.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Hurford, and then Councilor Reese.
I'd just like to add that the curbside tune-up came past my house, and the suggestions, we didn't get a sticker on the, unfortunately, but hopefully we can get there next time. But I found it really helpful. It was just just a few small issues in there that have actually changed our household behavior. So it gives me hope for others, and that education piece is very important. My question that I think was answered with, I think Chris was getting at as well, was just sort of that plastic measure, because those plastics, like Chris was saying, they don't weigh a lot, so I guess volume is the other way to assess that. And I'm just curious, I'm trying to find another term, but the weighing, the importance, weight, like the importance of that plastic composition and how we weigh that out, given that we're using a weight measurement for it, not a volume, but is any volume of plastic just more detrimental than the organics finding their way in there? Or how do you view the importance of that reduction of that piece? Because it seems to make up a small piece of this, but we hear about it frequently, the plastics. So I don't know if that's a too broad a question or if it was, but like, how do we address that? And is that really something worth focusing on and addressing? Because it appears to be quite a small piece in this.
Sure. So one of the things about plastics is it's true, it's a low density material. It's also very valuable in a lot of ways because plastics, it's made from petroleum products. So, you know, there's a lot of BTU value in that. So there are a lot of, I guess, large entities that are taking waste plastics and using it as a fuel to offset fossil fuels that they would take. So there's opportunities there. One thing about plastics as well is if you're not meeting the packaging protocol, for instance, and that Recycle BC has, then it's considered a waste stream. So, but you can certainly set up as part of your depots places where other plastics can be put in there, and then that can be diverted, and there's some value in that as well too. So.
Could you, for the audience viewing, could you explain BTU?
Oh, BTU. So BTU is like the heating value of the material. So it's kind of like, how much heat you can generate from gasoline, for instance.
British Thermal.
Yeah,
And I guess I would add, I think if we're looking at sort of from an environmental lens, there's two ways of looking at this. One is from the financial lens of just aerospace in our landfill, which is very expensive. We're doing very expensive vertical expansion. And density is really important in that. For instance, we should keep all the mattresses out because you can't squish a mattress. And we do, by the way. From an overall environmental aspect, organics are very important for the greenhouse gas effect as well. And we'll be coming in to talk about flaring of landfill gas at some point in a few months. But those organics are heavy, but also weighty on the environment.
Thanks for the clarification. Just the plastics was such a small percentage of this chart. I was having a hard time wrapping my head around. That was a really surprising number to me, but it makes sense. Thank you.
You good, Councillor? Councillor Rice, then Councillor Stoner, and then I'll add my 2 cents, and then we'll.
Thank you. So I don't like to go into the budget process looking for things to spend money on, but I do want to try to find some solutions to this. And it seems to me that it's enforcement and education. In the budget ask coming up, and I don't need to go into specifics today, but are you taking that into account to increase enforcement and education? So that's coming to us?
That's completely what it is. This part-time position that we mentioned is for education and enforcement for the solid waste pile.
Well, without belaboring that, but I was thinking also, I mean, just separate contacts like mailouts or leaflets or brochures or something like that, in addition to somebody walking around. Just things like that to really try to connect with the different people, especially the people that are not doing it correctly.
So we do have a budget line item in our operating budget of $20,000, and it's under the larger catchment of community projects, which is where we pull for things like that. So every year we kind of assess how can we reach the people the best way, and mail-outs and things through the utility bills is something that we've discussed and we can look further into, and that's where like the curbside tune-up comes out as well.
Just to build on what Councillor Herford was talking about, and I think that the process of using weight for contamination is particularly challenging for the BC Recycle or Recycle BC audits. That's where we see glass coming out as the highest because obviously glass weighs more than plastic. But they both serve different challenges within their Recycle BC systems. So I think that that's also just something to keep in mind as we look. We're not going to be able to change the way that Recycle BC does their audits, but it's something that's worth keeping in mind as we look at those audits. So the weight component is definitely influences what we see come up.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Do you have, I think you have a motion from a previous council around eliminating single-use plastics. Are we, how is this fitting into the budget ask for next year? And
I'll take that. Yeah, we had a motion that we should build that into our work plan. There wasn't a timeline on that too. And I think this data makes it clear that we really need to move the needle on just plain old getting people to source separate at all. We really need to focus our staff time on that at the early part of the year. Towards the end of the year, depending on how we're doing at this, we can start looking at what that public engagement would look like, and working with businesses on the reduction of single-use plastics.
so, it'd be interesting to note that large cities like London have eliminated single-use plastics. They did it very quickly. And look, the next day, people were drinking out of paper straws and using compost forks and knives. So is it really like a long-term process? We have a court case now that we do have some control over this thanks to the community of Victoria. There's urgency here. We have a landfill filling up, and I know, I'm hearing that there's multiple work streams and there's time, but this is a new council, new budget. We lost some time, we heard that in your presentation, for various reasons. So how do we catch up? And how do we get ahead of these waste streams? Because opening a new landfill and closing one is really, really expensive versus spending maybe a bit more money in 2019 to move multiple streams in the right direction and try and get on top of this and preserve our landfill. So that's kind of, I think, my challenge as you take the feedback from council is maybe how we do more. Faster, maybe prioritizing this more in the budget. Well, you don't need to answer that.
Can I'll just speak to it really briefly, is that the approach thus far, and we can definitely discuss it and bring it back afterwards, is that moving forward with the solid waste bylaw implementation, so essentially requiring businesses in particular to start training their staff, setting it up in their back rooms, in their kitchens, and also their contracts with their waste service provider. There's a lot of obstacles already just in that initial piece, and we want to make sure that we're able to overcome those. This is the approach we've been looking at it. And so by building those relationships and working with the business community to get over those obstacles, and then we tag in the single-use plastic ban, essentially, is kind of the way we've been looking at kind of the phase of it. We can move faster on it and sooner, but we have been looking at building the relationships and kind of getting the solid waste bylaw infrastructure in place first.
Are we used focus groups yet with citizens to understand, like if they bring their box of recycling to a focus group and then say like, let's go through this. Like, are we more than just the curbside audit, but actually getting people in a room and saying, do you know what to do with this? Like, sort this garbage for us. Are we doing that? Have we contemplated that?
We haven't done focus groups in developing the solid waste, zero waste strategy. There was surveys and one-on-one outreach through like the farmers market and things like that. Yeah, I guess I could say it's possible.
So just to clarify, do you mean we put out on Facebook, hey, come on down on Saturday morning and we're gonna do a contest to see who can sort best
The contest,
within, or
to watch people recycle what our typical recycling products are, things that they would get from the grocery store, and see where intuitively people put those, and then talk to them about where do you want to get the information on how to recycle? What's hard about this? Like, do you want to see it in the grocery store when you choose a product? This is a recyclable product. Or do you just want to figure that out at home once you've already got it home? So part of it is, like Nestor has switched how they package their meat to make it easier for people, because now the styrofoam doesn't have to be dropped off at the depot. It's a plastic that can be washed and put in their food bin. So that is a way that makes it easier for people, and Nesters has advertised that in store to say, we made this choice to make it easier on you. So I think people make better packaging decisions when they understand at the source what they're choosing. If you choose this packaging, it's not recyclable. If you choose this product, which is the same product but packaged differently, you can recycle that to your booth. And I'm curious about how people feel about where they want to get this information, how easy or hard it is to figure this stuff out, and watching people in the process of sorting their recycling is, I think, would be more telling to us than scanning bins.
I'll just jump in on that. Squamish Can has previously hosted kind of like Sort It event at, we did it at the Earth Day, we did it at, I think we did it at Canada Day, and Mary Lou did participate in that from the District of Squamish during her time filming for Shannon. So there has been some efforts in that regards. I can tell you it's not the easiest topic to engage somebody on a Saturday morning when they're at an event or a festival. So it has, when we designed it as a game for kids to come and learn how to recycle, or we had a higher level of engagement, but it's not the easiest topic to engage people on, for sure.
I think most focus groups, people get paid. And they do it on their own time and come in. Anyway, it's just another way of getting information and hear from people who are trying to do this with video art. I think that's all I have. Oh, can we visually audit how many dual bins are out on those days we collect organics? I just doing a visual survey of where I live, I go, interesting. Organics bin should be out today, and look, half the people don't have them. And it would just, like, if we had some numbers about.
That was part of the curbside.
So we can get the data of every single time a bin is lifted into the truck. The truck records it, okay. So I can get from GFL the amount of, December 11th, how many, whatever totes were collected in total. It's really difficult in smaller complexes, in townhomes and duplexes. It's easy to see kind of bin pairing often, but what the curbside auditors found is that in, say, Valley Cliff, for example, it would be it's difficult to always say this bin belongs to this home, because we tried to collect addresses with the bins, but it's not really possible because people miss the truck, so they bring the bin to the other side, and we tried using actually GPS, like dots and stuff, and it wasn't as easy as...
But we generally know how many bins are out there, and then on any given day, how many we pick up.
Right.
So it would give us a range to understand what the take-up has been on the residential side, because there's still a large amount of organics going into that waste stream as well. So that would be the only piece of data I'd be interested in.
Compared to the number of recycling ones.
Yeah, compared to the number of recycling ones.
See different trucks.
Okay, so you don't need anything from us today, just an update and...
Yes, my apologies, I forgot to mention that at the beginning, there is no resolution, just this is an update.
Great. Thank you for your work. Thanks, Wilbur.
Thank you.
Shannon, thank you. Okay, we're going to recess for lunch, and then we'll do the community forest update after lunch. So let's recess till 1:15. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Committee of the Whole. It's like the meeting that never ends. We're now on item 5, which is now item 3 because of our agenda change. Community forest update and appointments to the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Neil Plum, Manager of Real Estate. So yeah, today we're here just to give Council a bit of an update on the community forest. We haven't had the opportunity, obviously, to speak to you about this yet. And we do need to walk away from today's meeting with 3 members appointed to the board of the Community Forest Corporation. So I'll just give a quick little bit of background on community forest, how we got here. The Ministry of Forest and Range, which is from the province, has offered the district an opportunity to participate in a community forest here in Squamish on Crown land, just near and adjacent to the community here. The district was initially offered an annual allowable cut of 10,000 cubic meters. And in looking at that, we felt that it may be more viable for the forest and more effective to increase that annual allowable cut. So we've been working on a joint venture with Squamish Nation for several years to put together a joint venture corporation approach that would increase the annual allowable cut to 20,000 cubic meters, so doubling the size of it. In our efforts in the past, it's kind of a hard map to see, but the areas in red are the areas that have been looked at. It may not be exactly along those polygon lines at the end of the day, but it gives you a bit of a general idea that we're looking at lands that go from the area, sort of the urban area in Squamish, up to the park boundaries at the north end, and then heading south towards the gondola and into the refuge drainage area. So in terms of why we've been looking at this, it's been reported in that by pursuing the community forest, it's going to help continue with long-term economic development in the community, help with local employment. It's going to bring local decision-making, local level decision-making to the table and long-term planning. In the past, there's been some situations where there's been some questions about whether that's been truly effective, how it's been operated in the past. And so this just gives the community an increased hand in the planning aspect around watersheds, viewscapes, recreational areas, and managing the timber harvesting around those areas. We'll also help with education and research, and we'll just bring an overall community awareness, increased community awareness to forest management here in Squamish. Just on simple terms, the district and Squamish Nation will be 50-50 joint venture partners, each bringing in their 10,000 cubic meters of annual allowable cut. Neither party will be actively involved in the management or taking on the operating costs for the forest. That will be addressed in another manner, but will receive profits from the community forest operations at the end of the day. Within the limited partnership agreement, which I'll speak to in a little bit, there are some management principles embedded in that agreement, and primarily to demonstrate the viability and the value of forestry in long-term job security. And I won't read them by one, you can see them up there. So what I've done is handed out to you a map, this map here. It's hard to see on the screen, I can appreciate, but that's why I printed it out for you. And basically how this works is there is Northwest Squamish Forestry Limited and the District of Squamish are going to become joint venture or equal share owners in a company called Squamish Community Forest Corporation. So SCFC is going to be, that corporation has now been created. It's jointly owned by the District and Squamish Nation. And then ultimately what we're going to be doing is entering into a limited partnership agreement with the District of Squamish, Northwest Squamish Forestry, which is Squamish Nation, and the actual corporation that's created. Well, all three parties will enter into a, actually I'll put this up on the screen here. All three parties will operate under the limited partnership agreement. The Squamish Nation and District of Squamish will be limited partners. So that is to limit liability to the respective organizations for financial and for legal liability reasons. So the district and Squamish Nation are sheltered from any liabilities as a result of the corporation. And the actual corporation itself will be the general partner and the active operating partner of the limited partnership. Once this limited partner, there will be a board of directors that will be on the Squamish Community Forest Corporation. That's the name we're looking for today. There's going to be 6 members on that board, 3 from Squamish Nation, 3 from the district. Previously, we had 2 councillors and the mayor were appointed from the previous council, and now we're looking to replace those names. And so ultimately, the board of directors will oversee the governance Squamish Community Forest Corporation will do the active work, and then ultimately a community forest manager will be appointed that implements and does basically the bulk of the work. So in terms of where we are, it started out years ago under a letter of intent. That letter of intent was worked out and agreed upon. We moved to a limited partnership situation where that was approved by previous councils. The general partner corporation has now been established. We just need to update the board appointees. Once that's done, we will actually execute the limited partnership agreement and the shareholders agreement. And then once that's done, the community manager or community forest manager can be appointed. And then it can kind of get off and running. So this slide shows there's a variety of steps, 5 through 11 on the left, that need to take place to get moving. There's provincial applications, there'll be some community engagement, finalizing the land selection for the forest, creation of a management plan, a license will be issued from the province, forest stewardship plan will be created, and then we'll get into operating and harvesting from there. So for today, as I said earlier, really what we just need today is to get 3 members of council appointed to the board so that we can move forward with execution of the documents and get this thing up and running. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Council, any questions? Councilor Benio?
Once appointed, who are the directors accountable to? Is there sort of an ongoing accountability to council, or is it, essentially accountable to the citizens at the next election?
That's a good question. My understanding is the corporation effectively is a standalone entity. They're reporting back to council. We never got the board up and running with the previous council, so we haven't got there yet to know exactly what the relationship will be in terms of reporting back to this council. I imagine there'll be some check-ins at some point, but I don't believe there's a formal requirement to check back in on a regular basis with council.
Yeah, this is one of the things we talked about in some stage of the orientation. It's a council appointment. You have this divided duty because as a councilor here, you're sworn to do your utmost for the citizens of the community. And when you're a director on a board, you have a fiduciary relationship with the shareholders of that board. In this case, the shareholders and our constituents are the same thing. So there really is no divided thing, because the shareholders are the shareholders of the general partner. And that's the community.
I guess go directly to the shareholders or the shareholders through council, so these directors would presumably take direction from council.
The shareholder is the corporate entity of the District of Squamish.
Okay.
And the Squamish Nation. So you have as far as that company goes, you have a duty to all shareholders, not just half of them.
And if I might, Mayor Elliott, council will not be directing the corporation. The corporation is standalone. They're their own entity, just the same as SODC was. They're on their own.
It might be a case where council will get an annual update.
That's right, at the AGM,
At the
shareholder
AGM. And can ask questions about the operations, could make suggestions at that time.
That's right.
But there wouldn't be, the councilors appointed wouldn't be directed by the council.
And further to that, so the mandate of the corporation will be established through the articles of incorporation.
Any further questions? Councilor Daniel?
Well, I guess, do we have a sense of, is this meant to be a very much governance meets quarterly type board, or is this, it's pretty small scale right now, hands-on, very interactive with the manager?
Yes.
I think the beginning will be...
Wait a minute, which yes did you?
Yeah, sure.
It'll ramp up, it'll ramp down.
It'll ramp down.
It'll ramp down.
It'll be busy in the beginning as we go through all of these plans and all this work down here on that left side will all have to be approved by the board. And once that's approved, then the operations will kick in and there'll be much less interaction at that point. But still providing guidance as required, and there probably will be obviously some regular meetings, but not, in the beginning will be much more intense.
Councilor Anderson, I saw your hand.
Yes. So this is very welcome to see this proceeding. I've been involved, I was involved in the late 90s when the district and the Forest Service were involved in the community forest. At that time, public education was very much a goal of the project. And I see, Neil, that you have highlighted it in the benefits slide that you showed here. However, in the management principles in the letter of intent, there's no reference to public education goals in this project. And I just assume that we can, or the project can spell out those goals in the management plan. But right now, in the documents in front of us, there is in fact no reference to public education as a goal of the venture. The other thing that is noteworthy I found is that non-timber forest products are explicitly excluded in the business definition, which is rather unusual. And I would wonder about the Whistler or the Cheakamus Forest, community forest experience or plans for that. Most community forests of various tenure types do involve non-timber forest products because on Crown tenure, this is an opportunity with an area-based tenure so that you can integrate all these values. We've had correspondence from the local mountain biking organization, and that is one of the opportunities of an area-based tenure. You can integrate these values under one management and non-timber forest products included. So I just note that. And
What
yeah.
is a non-timber forest product?
Oh, sorry. Well, mushrooms, boughs for Christmas decoration, a long list of them, pharmaceuticals, and a growing sector, one that, of course, First Nations are involved with, as can be expected. Squamish used to have quite a business. A business used to be here buying non-timber forest products. It doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of faded away, but could be brought back with attracting entrepreneurs to get involved. I wonder, as a question, I'm sorry, I'm mainly noting those things for you, Neil, but I do have a question here regarding the organizational structure. The Whistler, or the Cheakamus Community Forest, had undergone some changes with the withdrawal of one of the partners, Richmond Plywood. I wonder whether we looked at that experience and whether we assessed whether the organizational structure would take that scenario into account. And I wonder what their experience is. Were they prepared for that? How did it work out? It's just a question for as we move forward on this. A note that under the citizen engagement section in your report to council, I wonder if there's a typo here, or it seems a bit misleading because the public might naturally expect citizen engagement or wonder about what that process is going to be, what kind of public input. And it states here, will occur as part of the implementation of the community forest as outlined in attachment 3. Well, attachment 3 is the proposed shareholder agreement, which doesn't address anything like citizen engagement. I wonder if you might be referring instead to attachment 7, the community forest implementation.
Correct.
But so that the public may be interested in that aspect. I had another question that maybe I'll save for later, and that is, where's the Squamish Nation Cut going to come from?
Don't save it for later.
But we'll save
Ask it now.
Okay. Well, if we refer to the map, 10,000 cubic meters will be contributed from the Squamish Nation's forest license. And on the map, I'll just wait for you to put it up on the screen there.
Yeah, thanks.
So down in the bottom lower left corner, we see the Refuse Creek Northwest Squamish Forestry chart area, which is part of the Squamish Nation's forest license. But where does the rest of the 10,000 cubic meters the Squamish Nation will be contributed come from? Is it all going to be up from that top of that basin there? I'm just curious because the rest of these chart areas are all BC timber sales, which is what is going to be offered to the district. But where does the Squamish Nation quota come from? If only that refuse chart or elsewhere as well? Thank you.
Would you like answers to all those right now? Okay, that's fine. I'll chip away at them. In terms of the
And council, it is more helpful to ask a question and wait for an answer sometimes. So, but Neil, hit us.
Okay, so in terms of the non-timber forest products, my recollection is that the community forest license offer from the province, this is going back several years now, was for the 10,000 cubic meters of the annual allowable cut. It wasn't about anything beyond the annual allowable cut. So that was the premise that we've been working on, that it would not include botanicals, that the offer from the province would not include any non-timber forest products. So that's my recollection on that one. In terms of ridge ply, I'm not fully familiar with the Whistler model, although my understanding would be that ridge ply was the operator as opposed to an owner. So,
Sure. Yes,
yeah,
I suppose
so
so.
my recollection, they were the operator that was selected to run the forest. So they were not embedded in the management structure, is my understanding.
Okay.
Okay, so they would be no similar or no dissimilar to in our situation here, just the community forest manager at the bottom of the food chain. The Squamish Nation annual allowable cut, my recollection was in the beginning that it was going to come from the TFL. They were going to pull 10,000 out of the TFL. Whether that's changed or not, and whether that's the final landing point is to be determined, I guess. But that was my understanding, and that was why we did a lot of work on how to set this agreement up, because they were giving up some of their cut up there and they wanted to make sure this agreement was very well structured to protect that interest that they were walking away from. So that's, again, I don't know the final landing point on that, but that was where I recall from previous discussions.
They will contribute volume, but not in a dedicated charter.
Not in charter.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay.
Neil, can I ask, what is the process for finalizing the boundaries around the community forest?
So if you go back to this slide, my understanding is that that will come in the land selection section number 7. So they're going to go do some more work on community engagement, get some applications in, and there will be some work between the board and the province to land the final selection.
But those items you listed as between 5 and 11 would be an annual event, wouldn't they?
No, my understanding is that the provincial application is for the community forest. The community engagement will be part of the upfront, I mean, there will be ongoing community engagement for sure as part of the operating of the forest, but what we're showing here right now is 5 to 11 is to get the forest up and running, up to the operations plan number 11, so harvesting can begin. And then I suspect there will be an annual engagement program with the community that will be established by the board and the operator of the day.
Different blocks each year.
Anything else?
Just the process or the frequency with which council can change its appointments if it wishes?
I think it can happen whenever it needs to be. Yeah. Just, it would require another resolution from council.
Councilor Anderson?
I think we should note the correspondence we received from Squamish Outdoor Cycling. And I think in their recommendation on page 2 of their briefing, there's a positive note here, that there's an interest and an expression of, yes, we can do this, but. And the but is the concerns regarding land use. But these are challenges and opportunities. In this community forest, so close to the community with such recreational pressures, we can actually do some R&D. How can we, for example, calculate the economic benefits and the employment benefits? Because their briefing does have some, make some attempts, but there's lots of work to be done on gathering this data together for comparative purposes. But it's one of the challenges and opportunities in this community forest. I think we should note their concerns, but also that they see and would want to be involved. And I think we can look at that optimistically as a work program.
Absolutely. I have spoken with Mr. Norman, who sent a letter a little while ago, and you know, actually I was very involved in this 14, 15 years ago on behalf of Sorka before I came to work for the district, so it's kind of like coming full circle now. So I think it's important for Sorka to get engaged with the board and determine whether their role is, and whether that's part of, if you notice on this one here, there's talk of a community advisory board at the bottom left corner there. So there will be that aspect to potentially work into this, so that could be a role for them as well, so. lots of options.
Two hands, Councilor Stoner and Councilor Herb. Councilor.
So just in terms of this transition point of actually bringing the board up to speed and the Squamish Community Forest Corporation becoming its own entity, what level of staff support is there anticipated in this transition? Is there any from either the nation or from the District of Squamish, or is it like you're nominated, run with it?
So the idea is that the staff support ends today. There's been a lot of staff support in getting it to where it is, but the idea is that it's an advisory board, and that the members of the board from council will be the ones, you know, involved in staff. I mean, we can support where we need to be, but our formal relationship hopefully will be ending soon.
There was a little note there that all those steps were to be funded by the forest manager, community forest manager, and then approved by the board. So there should be support on that side versus on the staff side. Councilor Herb, then Councilor.
Under the last council, this was the first board that's going to meet and move forward. The last one was that wasn't actually didn't get there. So am I right to assume that the community advisory board, the composition of that, the numbers involved, nothing's been done that way yet? This is just how.
It'll be up to the board once it gets rolling. Once the board's established, it can figure that part out.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's essentially brand new.
Brand new.
After so many
Blank
years.
slate.
Councilor Ritz.
Well, two questions. Has there been any discussion about the selection of a community forest manager? And if that's sensitive, feel free to say nothing.
Well, that would be the effort of the board. So nothing's been finalized yet. So that'd be up to the board to sort that all out.
So there's some selection process has to happen. And
it will be up to the board to figure that out, and that comes after the partnership's executed. So we've been working at a very linear path here, so that'll come up to the board. Next steps.
And the second question was the same thing about the community advisory board. Is there any process set up to fill places on that board?
Nothing's been established yet, and then that'll be up to the board to make those decisions.
Aren't you just like so happy to just hand that off? Yep, board. Yep.
It usually works the other way, right? You usually come in here and get work. Instead of him coming in and offloading, it's quite unusual.
I'm sure the board will find a way to give something to you.
Fair enough.
Councilor Pitt.
Yeah, I was just hearing this, it seems to me this would be a corporation with a significant amount of assets, and like, is there anyone at the starting point who has experience with a large-ish, reasonably sized corporation that, that has done this kind of thing before? And it seems like a lot to throw on, maybe some, a few councillors from Squamish Council and a few from Squamish First Nation, and
It's a bit akin to sitting on council, don't you think?
well, we have a
Large
whole staff,
corporation
though,
with
but-
lots of assets.
Yeah. We have a whole staff, and that's not here apparently.
Board will hire staff.
I would suspect that, in the beginning, there's a lot of big decisions to be made. I think the board can explore down the road different people, but I think given the starting point and the magnitude of this, I think it's probably very important that, members of council are there. Squamish Nation has appointed members of their council as well, so it'd be kind of two groups of council working together. Down the road, once it gets up and running and harvesting, maybe there's an opportunity to look at different people operating or being on the board, but I think right now there's some big decisions that need to be made around the management plans and things, so.
Is there any initial budget somehow, or the budget is based on what our annual allowable cut is, and
I'm sorry, I missed the
like
first part.
startup funds for this board, or?
Nothing's been identified yet. I mean, it may be that there's some nominal cost, but the whole way this has been set up is that the community forest manager will pay for all of the upfront costs, and then we'll take those costs out of revenues, and at the end of the day, whatever profit is left over will come to the district and to Squamish Nation.
So, go ahead.
Is this envisioned as a volunteer board then?
I guess arguably yes right now would
We've
be
been
yeah.
at it once,
Yeah,
We hadn't been asked that before.
no?
It's the same with the transit commission, it's assumed to be volunteer, and I suppose once the commission meets, the regional transit commission, it could decide that they should get a stipend for their work, so. But you make those decisions in light of your role. Any other questions? I mean, suffice it to say that those folks that are interested in these 3 positions, this will be work. This is in addition to your council work, your paid work. It will be, this is something it's taken us a while to get here, and I think there's a lot of energy to get this going. So to not try and drag it out anymore. I think there's interest on both sides to make this a reality. So it's something that if you want to put your name forward, it's a commitment, for sure. Councilor Hurford.
Other question, Councilor Pettingill touched on it with the ease of swapping out the appointees, but is there anything in any of the structure right now that would give us the term of that, or is it just that we'd readdress it after the next election, like a 4-year thing, or are we thinking this we, as a council, would like to review it annually, or?
I think there's an AGM, and any decisions like that would be made at the AGM, like any board is done. So I think we would have an opportunity to create the first board here, and then annual reporting would be an opportunity to switch those appointees. Does that seem aligned? It's the same as, yeah, the SSC, Squamish Sustainability Partnership.
One of the implications of this is that the district is going to become a stakeholder in a new way in the industry's problems, like wood waste and waterfront facilities. And in fact, that was one of the original intentions, that the district could become more closely affiliated and acquainted with a major industry. Back in the 90s, the Forest Service was receiving a lot of cutbacks, and the district manager was actually very seriously proposing to the district new collaborations, including sharing office space, stuff like that. That never has not come to light, although now we own the Forest Service building. But new kinds of collaboration were discussed back then quite seriously. But it does involve the district in a new role in our forest landscape.
We have to be careful about saying district in a new role. This is a limited partnership, so technically we have no role.
It will
That is
presumably
what
be
limits
reporting.
our liability. That's why we set it up this way. So we just have to be careful about how we
Sure.
speak to that council.
Better acquainted.
Through reporting from the board and the community forest manager.
Yes.
Yes, I think council will gain an appreciation of the opportunities and challenges locally to balance all these different values that we see before us.
I just want to clarify, in terms of these operations and these plans, I mean, it will be more work in the beginning, but it won't be the board's job to do the legwork on any of these, it's just to approve. So they will be approving these things, not actually going out and doing legwork.
Councilor Rice.
Do you know who the appointees are from the Squamish Nation?
I do, and unfortunately I didn't bring it with me. I can find out if that matters.
Just curious.
Run back and get it, but no, members from council, Squamish Nation Council.
All right. If there's no further questions, I think those interested should sort of declare their interest, so we know who's looking at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was it the last time, the last council?
This council?
Patricia.
No, council should,
Was the mayor.
from this council or from Squamish Nation?
No, from the previous council.
It was Mayor Heinzman, Councillor Chappelle, and Councillor Farr.
Councilor Sonic?
I am interested in stepping up.
I'm also interested in stuff. for this. I'm curious if the mayor, if you've given any thought into, if we're looking to fill 2 positions here, you're going to be there as the former mayor was, or if we're talking about 3 positions. Either way, I mean, I'm just curious on where we're going to go.
I have a bias that at least for the first year, the mayor should be at the table to give this some weight. I think that's important as a city initiative. So if people support that, then there's 2 positions. If council thinks that's a terrible idea, then you have more votes than me. So are there other interested people?
Yes, I'm interested.
Okay. Anyone else? Todd?
There's no seats left.
We're doing it more than our fair share. but
We're already over the quota, so.
we're already over quota.
Do you do one at a time? Because I would move that Mary Elliott takes the seat on that.
If somebody confirm that no one else is interested. Councilor Pennington? No. Councilor Reid?
No.
Okay, so we have 4 councillors interested, and myself. We could, what was that?
Well, I was gonna move that that Mayor Elliott be appointed to the board.
Is there someone seconding that?
Yeah.
Seconded by Councilor French. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. All right. I'm not sure of a fair way to do this, council.
Arm wrestling.
You know, you could all make a pitch and then we vote. We could draw names out of a hat. We're not limited, am I, Robin, in how we do this?
I don't know about drawing names out of hat, but not runoff election either.
I mean, ultimately
Yeah.
by resolution,
Yes,
but in terms
but-
of
Yeah.
selecting
How
the
you,
two.
how you get there, I think you can choose the process.
Okay. And so I don't think that decision's mine, I think it's ours to make of the process. So how do people feel about how we move forward here?
I'm certainly interested to stay abreast, and I'm particularly interested in public education opportunities and programming that will evolve. The role of this initial board is really organizational development, and setting that process in motion. I'm happy to step back for now, but I'll certainly be watching keenly, and somebody, if you guys are really keen, I'll certainly be watching it.
Everybody, your fault.
So are we down to 3 then?
Thank you, Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, I think I could make the same move as Eric, with the understanding I'd like to be first in line for when we revisit these 3 positions.
Just on that point, if I could make a suggestion, it comes up like any other company annually. One of the things that happens at an annual general meeting is the election of the board of directors. There's no long-term commitment. So we might consider, I was thinking about that, we might consider that the startup, ideally it's not going to take 2 years, but it might take 2 years, and so we might consider splitting the term. And the first group of directors sit for the first 2 years, and the second group, whoever they might be for the second 2 years of the term. And just kind of agree that that's the way we want to proceed with that.
Yeah, and one other thing, at one point we were contemplating establishing alternates, but in the end we didn't go down that road. But that's something we may want to revisit, is whether we set up alternates in case a council member can't make it to a board meeting that someone is there. So we'll look into that more, and then when we come back, or we can come back at a later date and revisit that, or the board can set that up and the board gets organized.
And just on that point, you'd have to embed that in the articles.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because otherwise, the usual standard off-the-shelf articles say that if a vacancy occurs in the board of directors, somebody gets sick or dies or resigns, then the board selects replacement to last till the next AGM.
And that
So
could be
that's
why.
the standard, you know.
Sorry, that could be why we didn't go down that road in the end, but we'll dig into that, just make
Yeah.
sure. It's been a while since I looked at the articles of incorporation, so.
I see this board as a great opportunity for learning for this council and for each council. So I don't think it's a position that you want to have the same people in for 4 years. I think some turnover would be good and healthy. And it is a great opportunity to, like Eric says, learn more about the forestry industry from a different perspective. So, John, are you staying in, or are you?
Nope, I'm happy to
Goodness,
allow these two.
thank you. It's very generous of you.
Then I'll move. Councillor Herbert and Councillor Stoner.
Seconded by Councillor Pettingill. Any further discussion?
Shall we introduce the concept of alternates, or do we need to?
Not at this
We
time.
would simply revisit it in 2 years' time?
Well,
do it all
we'll
then.
revisit it, staff will take it away and come back. If that's
Sure.
an option, we can then put another resolution on the floor.
Doesn't necessarily be part of this motion.
No.
Thank you.
This motion for sure.
No, it's motion. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So myself, Councillor Preferred, Councillor Stoner. Councillor Pettingill.
And maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but I would, at this point, feel a lot more comfortable if we were able to carve out, at least for the 6 months, some sort of access to these appointees, to some staff time. It feels like this might be a little bit more than just volunteer directors can take on. or-
Don't worry, I know where Neil works. No,
I'm
I know
not getting
Neil
off
talks
that
about
easy.
Henry.
I'm not getting off that easy. Despite what I tweet today, it's not gonna happen that quickly, so.
Yeah.
My
I think Neil recognizes that he will stay involved until we have the community forest manager and there's some momentum on that side, because right now it's, yeah. But I take your caution, and, yeah, we will certainly rely on our staff when we need to. Okay. I think we're done, right?
Yep, we're good.
Just a process question. So what am I doing now, Robin?
So you would like to recess to reconvene Monday, 17th at what time? Time and place?
Are we doing 9 a.m., Linda? For
On
the,
the 17th?
for the 17th for the utilities portion of this? Okay. So we're going to recess this committee of the whole until 9 a.m. on Monday, December 17th, here in council chambers. We will be here
Because we have to stream it. and
because we have to stream it. So
have
we'll be
some
here.
public.
So, yeah, we're now in recess. Thank you.